Welcome to the second Baba Nyonya Literary Festival by the Peranakan Association Singapore. I'm Nia Mei Ling, a member of the organizing committee of the festival. Some of you would have attended the inaugural festival in 2019. The festival returns this year bigger and better. Firstly, we're the proud recipient of a grant from the National Arts Council. Secondly, we are honored to count as partners our sister associations in Melaka, Persatuan Peranakan Cina Malaka and Persatuan Peranakan Baba Nyonya Malaysia, and also in Melaka, the Baba and Nyonya Heritage Museum and the Bendahari, a cultural and creative hub. In conjunction with the festival, the Bendahari has organized a slew of culturally rich activities, including a pantun writing session, a Dondang Sayang performance, and a Tok Panjang. This festival is also being screened live at the premises of the Bendahari, making this the Peranakan Association's first ever cross-border event. Being a part of this has opened my eyes to the prodigious amount of talent that is in Melaka, and I look forward to the day when Singapore and Malaysia are able to meld their talents together. At the 33rd Baba Nyonya International Convention in November last year, historian and author Kwa Chong Guan had asked, can the Baba Nyonya Literary Festival, going into its second session in March next year, inspire a new genre of Peranakan drama and literature? Like Mr. Kwa, we hope that this festival will spawn creative writing groups, and aspiring writers who write Peranakan-themed texts will emerge from them. But should these writers be writing in English or Baba Malay? Robert Yeo, one of today's panelists, is of the view that Peranakan literature in post-1965 Singapore should be in 100% Baba Malay, and that Peranakans who claim heritage but write in English cannot be said to contribute to Peranakan literature. Josephine Chia, one of today's panelists, is of the view that literature is not just about language, but also about capturing the spirit and soul of a culture. And as there are simply not enough people speaking Baba Malay, to insist that our literature is to be expressed only in Baba Malay will surely sound the death knell of our culture. All this is very evocative fodder for thought indeed, and we must continue to ruminate over them even after the festival. Regrettably, General Winston Chu has withdrawn as guest of honor because of unforeseen personal commitments. In his place, we are privileged to have Violet Oon, a veritable force of nature, who's also a chef extraordinaire and restaurateur, and has been Singapore's food ambassador since 1998. I'm also sorry to inform that Irene Lim, author of 90 Years in Singapore, has also withdrawn from the festival because of health reasons. I wish to go on to express heartfelt gratitude to the National Arts Council, our Malacan partners, the General Committee, in particular Colin Chee, President of the Association, for his wholehearted support of our literary efforts, Stella Wee for assisting with the logistics, members of the Organizing Committee, including Julia De Silva and Sean Sia, and finally, the participants of the festival, without whom this festival would not be possible. Organizing an event in a pandemic is no mean feat, and I wish to thank the good people at the National Library Board for their endless patience and for sponsoring this stupendous venue. Please note that we'll be using the Pigeonhole app to manage questions from the audience. Please scan the QR code on the screen or go to pigeonhole.at/baba2022 to ask your questions at the appointed times for the Q&A sessions. Please note that your questions will be projected onto the screens and will be seen by everyone. Before I hand the floor over to Colin Chee, President of the Peranakan Association, I'm duty-bound to inform you that you have to keep your mask on at all times, sanitize your hands frequently, not to mingle with each other, and not to eat and drink. Please note that there will not be any intermission in the program. Lastly, I hope you enjoy the festival as much as we've enjoyed putting it together. Thank you.
Thank you, May. Thanks for coming by, ladies and gentlemen, Babas and Nyonyas. Yesterday, yesterday's session was a very exciting one. And for the very first time, we had it live streamed to the region, especially to our partners in Melaka, where there is already right now a welcome audience. Thank you for all of you who are online watching this show and actually being involved in it during the Q&A session. I would like to thank especially May, who put this together. It's not easy organizing, getting 22 speakers, moderators, readers to participate, and to each of you also for taking time off on a Sunday to be part of this session. This year's literary festival is a little bit different from last year in the sense that we decided to make it more regional through technology. And we're actually looking at the feasibility and the viability and whether or not we should be doing the same thing to have our culture kind of spread on to other parts of the region. Right now it is with Melaka, hopefully KL, Penang, Phuket, Australia, Indonesia would want to build their own programs around our festival in Singapore, which Melaka is doing. And the Bendahari has, our partner in Melaka, has done a wonderful program building sub-programs, their own sub-programs around the festival that we have here in Singapore. And we are not going to bring them here, but certainly what we did was we're going to do a recording after this address, which I'm going to keep very short. A poetry reading, pre-recorded poetry reading by Nyonya, a poem by Nyonya Shirley Gyok Lim, and read by Audrey Lim Swee-Pik. They are wonderful. It's a wonderful poem that's well recited, and I just want you to enjoy it because it's a very powerful thing, and it just draws on the idea that it cannot be that talent resides only in Singapore. It resides everywhere else in the world, and with technology we can bring them here, right? Okay, thank you very much.
Ballad of the Father by Shirley Lim. When father sold shoes, my mother bought gold. We were 6 children before they were old. My father drove a Hillman, was favored in town by gamblers and nurses with whom he'd go down to the small city lights. Mahjong and cabaret, these few pleasures composed his day. The shop was the first to go, then the gold, then mother who saw all her jewelry sold. She packed up her bruises for large Singapore, for change alley bars, bazaars and stores. He didn't shoot us, although we ate like rats and outgrew our clothes, yet never were fat. An ordinary kind, in ordinary misery, he labored to keep us a family. The pity of a life, and nothing to add but struggle and love that can drive children mad. Struggle and love, peeling him to his core, to a dumbness stuck, final and poor.
Hello, good afternoon. How many of you were here yesterday? Okay, I must repeat the question. I just had my face made up for 2 hours to look natural, and my jewelry is borrowed from Foundation Jeweler. It is the same brooch which the Singapore government presented to Queen Elizabeth 12 years ago in her Jubilee, and she just wore it yesterday. Okay, this poem is so Peranakan, very tragic. Life is tragic. First thing, she sold her jewelry. That's the most tragic to a woman. Okay, Peranakan woman, just to tell it's a culture, right? And I did what any Peranakan woman will do. They either go to the pawn shop and get their jewelry, or they go to the bank. I went to Foundation Jeweler just to get, everything. So that's really tragic. That's a tragic life. Now, actually, I'm going to maybe do nothing more. Can I just get my water? And I've had a stroke, so I'm a bit kalang kabut, okay? 7 years ago. Thank you. And very important, you must ask for help. That's what I've been telling people. A lot of people don't ask for help, then jatuh all over the place. Now, I said yesterday that my job, actually, everybody is like doing a lot. My job is to put us in touch with our past. Hold on a second. Hold on. And Mei-Ling is here to tell me when to shut up. Now, I think I said something which is very important. There's no future in a culture without respect for the past. And this respect is so important because otherwise, as I said, if you're a creative person, how do you know you're creative? If you haven't compared it to somebody else's work. Now, in this library, there's something very important. There is the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the book, which was the first book written in Baba Patois. And it is, I'm reading, he lived from, author is Chan Kim Boon, he lived from 1851 to 1920. Here published is 1892 to 1896. 4,000 pages in 30 volumes. You all better go and borrow this thing and look at it. Because unless you have seen this first book, how can you understand what's present? And I said, those of you have been here before. And I'm going to repeat again because some were not. American pop culture is so great because every single cutting-edge pop icon references the Beatles. They reference Elvis Presley. They even reference Charlie Chaplin, who wrote Smile in 1923. And it was Michael Jackson's favorite song. In Singapore, how many of our pop stars know The Quest? And to me, that's tragic. Because unless you respect your own past, nobody's going to respect you. Because if you create something, they think it's something out of a desert. And you're not out of the desert. So this thing is there. Everybody better read. I'm reading it. It's Cerita Dahulu Kala, namanya Samkok, atau Tiga Negeri Berperang. It's known as Samkok in our culture. Now, I think many people who are writing Peranakan literature does not even know this, and it's upstairs or downstairs. It's somewhere in here. It was donated. So I do not read, and I think Robert has said something interesting. I must say something else. Robert Yeo came back to Singapore, I can quote, 1974, and he wrote the first Singapore play. I was an art critic in 1971. My first job is as a writer in the newspapers. And to me, that's my only proper job. I'm such a snob. I'm more impressed by the fact that I was asked to give a talk in the National Gallery in 2020 on art and architecture from 1969 to 1989 than I am from anything I did in food. That just shows I'm such a snob, right? Art is so important. Now, and Robert came back, and before that, all the plays were Ang Mo. Robert, I must find the page again. And they were like Beckett, or they were Shakespeare, they were even The Glass Menagerie, which I used to review. Then Robert came back and wrote something called Are You There, Singapore? And you all better go and read it, because it's a Peranakan boy. Are you a Peranakan boy? Who doesn't, he now believes that it's not Peranakan play and literature unless it's written in Baba Patois, which is interesting. Because I think we should all learn. And don't say that because we don't know, then cannot create, then too bad. Because people learn Latin till today. People learn Greek, people learn ancient, other cultures learn the ancient languages. Why should not we? It should be part of a hobby, I think. So I do agree with Robert's view a bit, because it makes you into another world of academia. It takes you another world of creativity, which you are copying out if you say we cannot write, so we cannot speak, so we have to write in English. It makes you, as a young, creative person, think, okay, should I study this language? Because it's a beautiful language. It's Malay by Baba Patwa, and I read something which I believe all along, that we all have Malay blood. Otherwise, if you don't have Malay blood, you know what your ancestress was, right? Lady of the night. Otherwise, she wouldn't be here, right? It's like any new culture, like our men going to Vietnam, right? Or going through, like going to a new territory. The women don't go. The women are back home, they don't go. So do not claim you're 100% Chinese, because what does it mean? So the men came, they married Malays. So I said yesterday that, and there's this DNA thing done last year. I read a piece in National Geographic, that there's 5% of Malay blood in all of us. So I was saying that the Malay culture in us is ours, it's not borrowed. It came from our ancestors. And it may be different from now, because any immigrant culture that adopts something, you adopt something and it remains exactly like that. If it's 4 centuries ago, it will be the culture of 4 centuries ago. That's why people from China come here. I tell them that if you want to know what China was 200 years ago, you look at the Peranakans. Because China has changed, but we haven't changed. Our Chinese cousins are still the Chinese. So that's my feeling. So just remember that whatever we have in Malay in us is ours. It's part of our cultural DNA. We did not borrow it. It was our ancestors who brought it. Okay, and our ancestors, our Malay ancestors, so it's correct. We have 5% Malay ancestors and 95% Chinese, which is correct as well. So Robert wrote this play, which is very powerful, and then I reviewed it, and I think I said that it was to do with identity. He felt an identity when he came back, but I think with the play, the rest of us felt an identity with being Singaporean. People like Robert, people like me who lived overseas. I was overseas 1961 to 63, and last time you don't fly here and there. You have an awareness of your identity or lack of identity more than people who are here. Because when you're abroad, you were from England, right? You question it. Because people like England are going to question you. Like I knew the Maple dance, I knew everything Angmo, I did not know anything of myself. And they don't respect you. They think you're mad. They ask me, what about your dance? So I think Mei Ling is going to tell me to shut up soon in 2 seconds, right? Okay. So I think maybe that's what I have to. Secondly, I may leave halfway, because I get tired, just to tell you. So I'm not being rude. And maybe that's the questioning that needs to be. Yesterday we had on cookbooks. I was a bit disappointed. It was all about how to cook sambal belacan and what machine to use. But it should have been food in our culture. Well, if it's a literary festival, the literary is more than the food. And all about cooking sambal belacan, which machine do you buy, and all sorts of things. But it could have been so exciting if you just remember it's a literary festival. It should have been food as literature, in our literature, okay? So I hope nobody's going to disappoint us today. Thank you so much. Can I have this? Can you please? Okay, thank you. I can jatuh.
Okay, the first panel will be moderated by Raymond Wong and will comprise Christine Ong Kiet Neo, who will read from Nyonya Kabaya, Peranakan Heritage Fashion, and Norman Cho and Chris Low, who will read from the Bejeweled Lives of the Peranakans. Can you put your hands together for them? If you have brought sarung kabayas and jewelry, please come forward and place them on the table in front of the panelists. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Raymond Wong. So it's my first time doing this kind of moderating job. So I hope everything will go smoothly and well. Yeah, so a while ago we heard Violet say about the culture is so unique and so ours. And it's true because during my past 16 years doing kabayas, I bump a lot of people, and people who love kabayas, for example, they invoke memories of their mom, and they start to get inspired by its artistic value in its clothes and stuff. That, yeah, there was once there's a customer of mine where the husband and the wife came to my shop, and the husband just suddenly cried. And you wonder how come the husband would cry so terribly in front of everybody. Then the wife said this, Raymond, you will never understand because your husband will only be yours when your mother-in-law passes away. Then I asked her, yeah, only for yep. Yeah. So somehow or another, I asked the lady, why your husband crying you like that? And she said that, oh, when mother passed away, the son misses the mother so much that he would cry in front of the beautiful kabayas almost every few days. And then one day the husband said, Suma buang lah, I don't want to tengok they all anymore. Otherwise I end up crying every day. And when she did that the next morning, by evening when the husband came back and said, where's mama's baju? He said, Suma all buang already. And when he ran down to the HDB void deck, it's totally gone. Because at the end of the day, kabayas like this, right, if you throw it downstairs, the HDB flat, people, if they know the value, they'll sure pick them up, especially when she put it by the side of the leaf. So, good luck. Yeah, so back to topic. Today we have three interesting people beside us. We have like Christine Ong, Chris Low, and Norman. So for Norman, he's a Peranakan from both sides of his family, and he has been having a great interest in collecting Peranakan jewelry for a long time. And that's why we invited him over here, because he's going to share something about his book on the bejeweled. And Chris Low is actually a designer, and she's also a publisher. She actually worked very closely with Norman to produce the book. So it's time to sell your koyok, show the book out. Yeah. And we have Christine Ong Kiat Neo. She has been loving kabaya fashion for a long time, since young, if not wrong. And she always admired her mother's and aunt's beautiful outfit, and that's why it sparked her passion and love for the Nyonya Kabaya. Yeah. So before we start, we'd like to invite Norman, because he wants to do some sharing on his book first. Norman?
Hello. Okay, maybe I will just do a reading from my book on one of the chapters which evoke some memories of jewelry during my childhood. It's called Golden Memories in a Buckle. This gigantic pound buckle was worn by my great-grand-aunt Annie Chong. Without fail, every Chinese New Year, she would seat herself regally on her favorite throne to receive the traditional soja from my family, among others. I recall kneeling in front of her with my eyes fixated on the glittering gold buckle, which was peering bashfully half-hidden behind her translucent robia voile kebaya. Ipo, panjang-panjang umur, I would wish her. Her return wish to me would be pandai-pandai surat. I was briefly mesmerized by her buckle in that fleeting moment before the ang pao was trusted into my hands. This ritual happened year after year till she passed away when I was in my early 20s. Such were my vivid memories of Chinese New Year in decades gone by. I'm glad to be able to hold on to the memories in this gold buckle. Okay, so my book actually carries a lot of interesting stories relating to families, how sometimes, in the Peranakan culture, jewelries were pawned or sold, how the gambling bibits will lose their, family treasures. So it's not only a book on, jewelry, it also carries the cultural significance, historical, background of the jewelry. I've also included in the book how the jewelry were made, so it gives you some idea how it originates. So it's a book not only for the Peranakans, it's also useful for jewelers to get inspiration, and for the general public to have an idea what Peranakan jewelry is all about. So if you want to read more of Annie and her gold buckle and other stories, you can get this book. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you. So Norman, for you, right, how you started out collecting Peranakan jewelry? What makes you so interested in collecting them? What's the significance behind it?
For Peranakan jewelry, my starting point was when I was young. I used to be fascinated by all the blings my grandmother wore. When she has function, she will lay out all her rings, earrings, deciding what to wear. So I was as a kid, you are very attracted to all the twinkling and the blings of all these diamonds and intans. So I would play around with it. So many years later, there was an exhibition on Peranakan jewelry by the museum called Gilding the Phoenix. So that was where it reignited my interest in Peranakan jewelry. So I started collecting. That was sometime 30 years ago, 1992.
Yeah, if not wrong, Gilding the Phoenix was one of the earlier books that wrote about Peranakan jewelry. And sadly to say, back then when Edmund Chin sold his book, there's only 300 copies. What happened to the rest? Apparently we heard that there was a huge fire and the alarm was set and the water from the water sprinklers got all the books wet and destroyed. So that's why it's so hard to get Gilding the Phoenix. So with Norman's book like this, The Bejeweled, being released, it's rather good for the community because very few people get the chance to know more about Peranakan jewelry and its design and the way it's made and everything. Yeah. So for Chris, how did you get yourself involved with Norman in producing the book?
Hello, yeah. When I first saw Norman's collection, I find that he has a lot of rare and unusual pieces, very unique. And I'm also a new collector myself because of the trip to Phuket Convention. I think when I was there, the Nyonyas there wore from head to toe. The jewelry, they had the headgears, necklace, earrings, and they were big, even the croissant, very big and attractive. So that actually started my interest in the jewelry. Looking close at each croissant, then you find that there's motifs, very interesting, what do you call, handwork. The craftsman's then was very fine, and I'm very curious to know more. So when I saw Norman's collection, I find that it is good to put into a book so that people can admire what the past pieces were. And when I read his manuscript, I find that he has very valuable information that can be shared and probably preserve Peranakan culture. So with that, I got excited and asked Norman, would you like to put this into a book?
So how long it took you to produce this book with Norman?
Well, God's grace, everything was very smooth.
Very
because,
smooth.
Yes, as a designer, I already had in mind what to have. As a collector, myself as a beginner, I know what I want to have to find out more. And Norman covers not only his childhood stories to adulthood, he also has weddings and mournings. And then he also covered the technical part of jewelry, which is very interesting. And for me as a collector, I think it is very useful for beginners, like how you set your ring, you know. And then, to me, Peranakan designs are very intricate.
True enough, because when I was young, when my grandmother Kim Chu was alive, she used to complain to me about my grandfather. So what happens is, my grandfather is from Fuzhou. So in the 80s, he likes to buy a lot of gold and send back to China, and this got my grandmother really very mad. Because it's like all her hard-earned money, and you are taking all your money and buy gold and send back home. And my grandmother was telling me, said that my grandfather likes to buy Peranakan jewelry because apparently the craftsmanship is something that is not you can find back in China. Because China values gold that is high in content, but you can't have very much designs carved onto it. But Peranakan jewelry, which is usually between 12 to 18 or sometimes lower, you can do more intricate designs that workmanship is actually the main crux, which Norman's books actually wrote a lot about it. Yeah, which I'm really amazed that, wow, within like 20, 30 years, you got all so much information on the different types of techniques in it. Yeah.
Actually, when my criteria for this book was, actually I had to ask Norman for permission. If I do this book, I want my photos to be big, so that I don't have to use magnifying glass to see the details.
True. Yeah. Especially our eyes are getting more blurred every day.
So I find that this book is, in a way, when you look at it, you know exactly what to look for, right? And look at the pieces, you see right away, the earlier days, they come up with motifs, different motifs. You have insects, you have deer. The culture is very rich. Maybe it was the craftsmen they are Chinese, so they use like fulu so you have the deer, and the influence is very appropriate for all this.
That means most of the designs inside would have Chinese motifs in it, usually?
Actually, initially the old motifs are actually very European. They actually copied from, Spanish design, old Dutch design. And then later on, they have probably in the late 1800s, they have the Chinese design, which came in like the Buddha's finger citron, what they call the fosso, and also perhaps deer. They have got phoenixes, which are very Chinese. Then towards the 1920s, as the Peranakans became more educated, they looked forward to British kind of a design. So they have the crown featured inside. And in my book, there is a very beautiful flying horse.
Can you find the picture and show the guests? So it must have cost you a lot of money in this hobby, right?
Yeah,
How much are you spent so far?
Spread out over 30 years.
But in your book, right, there's some good find, right? Like I read in the book that you bought. There's this lady who sold you this ring, and she said this is costume jewelry.
Because,
then when you wash it, you found out that it's really intan and gold.
Right, because they do not know what they are selling sometimes.
Oh, it's very interesting. You can see the Pegasus over there. Yeah.
So in this book, you see, I want to blow it up so people will see the motifs on the croissant itself.
We got more than 300 pieces of design in the book because
it's all Norman's
all from my collection.
Wow, I wish I have that kind of cash to buy this kind of jewelry.
I think over years.
I think now should be very mahal now, right?
Yeah.
I think now I know why my customer cried so much. Because all these things are really all fine work. And back then my customer cried when she saw some of the finished jewelry in my shop. It's because it reminded of her mother-in-law. And then when she cried, I said, hey, your mother-in-law very sayang you. She said, no, my mother-in-law hated me till the day she died. Then I asked her what happened, why your mother-in-law so bad? She said, no, when we moved our house from Tembeling Road to HDB, a lot of the furniture cannot bring back. And her mother-in-law, right, is the real old Bibi with the hairstyle, with the Sanggo Nyonya. And she said that her mother-in-law had this old Ovaltine container wrapped with many layers of towel, and she actually used it as a pillow just nice at her neck, so that her hair will always be prim and proper. So when they moved house from Tembeling to HDB, she threw away a lot of rubbish, and that Ovaltine pillow was also thrown away. Then at the HDB flat, the mother-in-law was saying, where's my pillow? And she said, buang already. And in the end, the mother-in-law said, you better go and find it back. All my jewelry, everything is all inside. Oh my God, I wonder the Karang Guni got pick them out or not. But, yeah. But can you imagine, all these things are really handicraft things, and people really treasure them, even though they are old items or heirloom items, in fact. Yeah. So now I'm going to turn my attention to Christine. Yeah, Christine. So what made you interested to collect and wear kebayas, actually?
Thanks, Raymond, for the intro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my interest started when I was young because my mom, I call her Ma, and all my aunties, in all their adult lives, they never wore anything else but sarong kebaya. So, I was quite intrigued that actually it's quite a fuss to wear with, the whole set. But to them, it's nothing. They just wear it in a jiffy, because they're so used to it and because they wear it almost every day. So even at home, they would wear just a simple blouse, but it's always with the sarong. So even my mom and my aunties all passed away in the 80s and 90s, up to the last day, it's always with the sarong and the blouse. I have never ever seen them in pants, in blouses with pants, never ever. So my mom and my aunties, they inspired me to say that you must try to carry on this tradition of wearing sarong kebaya. But I was working and I loved the kebayas. They were so intricate designs, but I couldn't wear them because it was not appropriate at that point in time, when you're working in the corporate office. But I treasured them, so I kept them. So I have almost about 100 pieces of mostly vintage kebayas. Yeah, but what I'm wearing today is a copy of my vintage kebaya, which I still have them. So in order to share my collection of kebayas, I said, why not I just write a book to promote my mom's legacy of the sarong kebaya. So I think I've done something for her legacy. So I'm very happy that I've done it. And it took me actually not too long. I took about 10 months to complete my book.
Wow, how come you all do things so fast, one?
It's because I have all the materials, I have all the kebayas. What I needed at that time was to get a good photographer, and then I have to instruct the photographer, in fact, how to project the kebaya, because he may not know what's in my mind, how I want the subject to be focused. So I have to tell him, oh, this one you have to match this way. Either you put on the mannequin, either you put it on the table, or whatever. So like today, I'm bringing few sets just to showcase how I match them. Okay, the problem with a lot of ladies when they told me that they would love to wear, but they don't know how to match them properly. And also the problems of how to fasten the kebayas. Because the kebayas got no buttons, so we have to fasten with a set of brooches. So that's the problem. They say they take hours to just dress up. So I said, no, there must be a better way of moving forward. And also the sarong, like you see, the batik sarong, you must know the art of folding it, of how to tie the sarong. Otherwise, you find that you won't be able to walk properly. You won't look very nicely, done. So I've come up with new ideas of why not make the sarong into a sarong skirt where I use zippers, I have waistbands, and so it sort of more form-fitting and easier to put on. So you don't waste so much time when you dress up in the sarong kebaya.
True, because nowadays a lot of young girls, they don't really know how to lipat the sarong. Some of them, you would even say that if I lipat my sarong, how am I going to chase after the bus? How am I going to put my first foot up onto the bus? You know what I mean? It's so difficult. Yeah, so I think it is actually can't be helped. It reflected our times that now it's modern. Maybe it's easier for the younger generation to appreciate better sarongs with tailored skirts. Yeah. So Christine, so you brought some of your favorite kebayas, right? Yeah. So can you tell us roughly how would you match traditional kebayas with the sarong skirt?
Okay, firstly, I do the matching before I do the sarong. So first, if I have a piece of, when you buy a piece of kebaya, look at the flower designs and the colors. Then you try to match with, the sarong that you can match with one of the colors of the flowers or the motifs. Then you find that it's nice. Because if I put this with this, you don't see, you don't bring out the beauty of the kebaya. So I have to do something like this or another piece of green will also look nice. Yeah. So this is the green piece. Now this piece, this is a new design. It's fruity. So what I do, I match with sarong like that. Take one of the colors of the fruits that can bring out the color and the beauty of the kebaya design. Yeah. And this one, okay. This is a vintage piece. This is not. This is modern. This is the latest one. Yeah. So this vintage piece, I bring two different sarongs to match. You see, right? And you can also bring other colors, like this one. It can be green, but look at some of the.
As long as one of the colors on the kebaya can be seen on the sarong.
Yeah, it will complement the kebaya.
Yeah.
Can you see that? Yeah, because if I match with this, no. Doesn't go. So this is where I have a little bit a detail for colors, to see the matching is good. And then that's where I managed to sort of promote the use of sarong kebaya. So I hope my book will help more ladies to want to put on the sarong kebaya.
I also noticed that your book also features on how to match with modern clothes like jeans and stuff like that. So as a traditional Nyonya, are you okay with the idea of wearing modern clothes with kebaya?
Yes. Yeah. Because when I was in the corporate world, I remember I put on jeans or pants, and I wear a tube and I put on over a kebaya as a jacket. And they look good, and a lot of people like it. So I was thinking, that's a good idea of moving forward for the younger generations. Because if they don't want the sarong, they find it too cumbersome, why not just wear it as a jacket? So it's still nice. So I'm not, there's no problem with me when we move forward that we should sort of modernize it a bit, make it easier. Yeah.
But I think the old bibis in the past were not so compromising. Yeah, because I bumped into a few people that even if I add crystals onto the kebaya once, I got one Peranakan old lady who said that, hey, you're adulterating my kebaya, you know. Only Peranakan kebaya got no beads or crystals on top. But the thing is, when you're reflecting times and the younger generation's preference and taste, we really have to adapt and meet the requirements so that the culture can really evolve and move on and carry on in its new look lah. Yeah. So it was rather interesting that in her book, she actually dared to feature how to match kebayas with sarong, or kebayas with sarong, kebayas with pants, etc.
Dresses, you can wear like say a black dress and then just wear a jacket over it. Looks very, very elegant, very nice.
Yeah, so I think it's rather interesting because she's trying to target the young audience. Just like myself, I try to introduce my young niece to wear kebayas since 2 years old. And now she has like 6 sets of kebayas that she refused to lend her younger sister to wear her kebaya and said it's still hers and she still wants to wear it. So you can imagine how beautiful kebaya is, and they find that there's a special place in everybody's heart, you know. That even at one time when I attended my friend's grandmother's funeral, I didn't know that grandmother is Peranakan. Like, I was shocked to see her coffin, and beside her coffin, right, it's all lined with like hundreds of kebayas by the side, all going to be cremated. Yeah, I saw it. I was like really shocked. Then I was asking her, say, hey, why don't you ask your wife, right? Take one piece or two pieces for yourself to remember lah. Say, Mama that say no, so cannot anyhow take. All must go to burn. Yeah, but this shows how much the old grandmother loves her kebayas, that even in the afterlife she wants to bring her kebayas along. So I can see Linda shaking her head. Yeah, but it did happen. Yeah. So for Christine, the book that you produced, so far so good. How was the reception among the young people?
It is good because even lately, there's a young couple who wanted to dress up in sarung kebaya for the tea ceremony, the wedding. Even during this COVID, I still get some young couples who want to wear for the tea ceremony. So what happened is, one of the guys, the groom, he's very nice. When he saw my book, he said, I'm going to buy it for my mother-in-law, my mother, my sisters, my cousins. So besides sarung kebaya, he also bought my book because he found it very colorful and very sharing. I shared a lot of my kebayas in there, which I think is a good idea that the new generations will learn how to appreciate and perhaps try to continue to wear as part of our costume in Singapore.
Thank you, Christine.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our half an hour session here. So if are there any questions from the floor that you want to ask Norman, Christine, or Chris? I always get the names confused, when they're side by side. Yeah. Okay, we have one person over there want to ask a question. Mm-hmm. Okay, putting the krongsang, okay. Mm.
But do you need to close it down with the Do you then also need to use the crossang, because that's the big issue, to close it?
So, Christine, how would you wear your krongsang?
Don't worry, I'll share with you later. I'll show you the easiest technique to put on the karosangs, so that you won't have problem in the.
If not wrong, there's two ways of wearing the krongsang, right?
Actually, there are many ways, but I don't even follow my mom's way because I found that's the old way. I found a better way that's easier and faster to put on the krosang, the brooches.
Otherwise, the easiest way, right, is put snap buttons first. Then after that, krongsang is so much faster and easier.
But you cannot wear a krosang. You cannot wear a kebaya without krosang.
You can wear it as a jacket, loose jacket, without just put a simple brooch around the waist. That's good enough because I wear it that way. You wear a tube, then you wear it as a jacket, and you don't want it to fly open, so you put on a brooch around the waist. That's it, yeah.
Okay, and as an ECMO, I'm excused for everything, and I'm sorry.
Actually, many years ago, one of my customers actually came, and she was surprised that she had difficulty wearing the krongsang. And then she was like bising until one of the customer, the OBB by the side, said, oh, then you should train your husband. Because wearing the krongsang, right, brings me closer to my husband. Because each time I got difficulty, he has to put the krongsang for me properly. And that's where I pull him closer to me. True, right? It makes sense, right? So maybe Linda, you should try to train Colin to have you put more often. Ronnie, you got to do that for your wife or not? Yeah. Okay, that's it. Any questions from the floor? Are we at Daisy? Can someone pass the mic to Daisy?
Daisy want to ask. Daisy is my good friend.
Christine, what I do is I make a panel on the kebaya so that you can pin it easily with press starch.
Yes.
Because it's very hard to pull the two sides together. So all my kebaya, I make a panel there. We press start, and then you can pin your kerongsang accordingly. So I pin my kerongsang, the first one, then I pin on the last one. Then the center, you can adjust the distance. That's how I do it. And my question is this, I want to see how you do it.
Okay, sure.
For the benefit of all of us,
Yeah.
as extra input, you don't have to undress yourself to show us how you do it. So can you do it and show us now?
All right, sure.
Yeah?
I brought a set of croissants, but let me just explain first. When you say you have one piece of cloth, you add on, it's to make it easy to wear, but the only thing now is, if you want to wear it as a jacket, that flap doesn't look nice. You know, you see that center portion with the buttons. So without the buttons, it's more flexible. You can wear it over your dress, over your pants, whatever. So there is a simple way to pin. Some people try to use, what do you call it, a fastener?
Snap buttons.
No, the pin, the safety pins.
Safety pin.
They use safety pins at the side, you can, but that's like the old-fashioned way, like my mother used to wear. They push to one side, then put the 3 safety pins, then open up the front, then put on the croissant. Yeah. But I find that the reason I didn't like the idea of wearing the croissant from the top first, and then the last one, and then put in the center. And that's where you waste a lot of time trying to figure out how to pin it, because it's a very odd way of pinning. No, I start from the top, I go to the center, and I go to the waist. So if you really want to know how to get to the center, go to the mirror. You put the top first, then you know where is your last croissant. Then from the mirror, you can see where is your center. So you go first, second, third. Instead of first, third, second, then you go back and forth. No, I think that's a very cumbersome way of wearing croissant. 1, 3, 2. No, you do straight down. So look at the mirror when you're wearing your kebaya. You won't go wrong. You will get it nicely there. Yeah. So I will show you later. I don't know. Huh?
Maybe afterwards, right, when we have our break,
Yeah,
we'll
maybe
get
after the break.
Chris-
Those who are
Christine to
interested,
demonstrate.
I will just bring my croissant and I'll show you. Yeah.
So
No
for
problem.
those who really got trouble wearing the kerongsang, best call your husband, train
he
them
can
up.
also learn together. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions for any of them? Oh, we have some questions on the pigeonhole. Let me see. Norman, are there any motifs in Peranakan jewelry that are specifically for festive celebration?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, Peranakan jewelry actually, it depends on the person who commissioned the pieces. Most of the jewelry is actually celebratory, so they have things like birds, bees will signify, hard work, and phoenix symbolize, the empress, and you have like, a crown, which signifies allegiance to the crown colony. So all these are good symbols. So it depends on the person who commissioned what design you want it to be. So most of the design, like even the Buddha's finger citron, is also for Chinese is fu, which is prosperity. So all this has meaning. So most of the design has good meaning, auspicious meaning. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Are there any other questions? Okay, this one is rather interesting. Is the kebaya more suited to fat ladies or slim ladies? So what do you think? Huh? No. What's your view, Christine or Chris?
No,
You all wear kebayas more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even bigger size ladies, they would look elegant in a sarong kebaya. You imagine if you have to wear traditional, either you wear a cheongsam or sarong kebaya, which would you prefer? I think more tedious to wear. You see that The kabaya actually the kabaya and sarong hide a lot of your flaws. If you have fat arms, you can't see because it's fitting, right? And because you have a V-neck, it sort of makes you look slimmer at the top. And then it's got a waist, so even you're big, you can wear top maybe like black, darker color to make you look slimmer, like most people like to wear black. You don't wear white. And then you see at the waist, it sort of opens up, so it gives you a kind of shape. And don't forget, your sarong is the other one that's also flattering because it covers your, maybe you got bigger legs, bigger thighs, doesn't show. So for example, my mom, she used to be big, but she always looked very elegant in a sarong kebaya. That every time when I bring her to a church, everybody will look out for her because she's the only one in her sarong kebaya. So actually, regardless of your body shape, which I cover in my book, it doesn't matter, you will look elegant. It's how you match them. Yeah, so you wear something maybe darker top, but maybe lighter at the bottom. You know, so or if you're big on the hips, then you wear something darker, a darker sarong at the top, and lighter blouse, kebaya at the top. Can if you know how to match them properly, don't worry, you will look fabulous.
Somehow there's some truth to it because like during my years as a kabaya designer, we have some ladies who are on the more flashy side. We always find that with more embroideries, people's attention to their figure is like no longer there. They'll just admire how beautiful the embroideries, that's all. Yeah, but usually, right, when I see fat ladies wearing kabayas, right, actually the first thing that I really want to see is where they got wear their penting or not. Because usually the penting would be the most valuable one, you know. Because got once, right, I had a customer, she was like complaining that all her elder sisters got married and they got gold belts for their dowry, but she hadn't got her belt yet. Then she is in her 60s, so I doubt so lah. But my colleague was so kind and she was saying, don't worry, you wear kabaya so nice. And by the time if you really got a chance to wear a kabaya, your belt will be the most valuable one because your waist is already about like 55 inches all around. Yeah, so let me see, what other questions? To Christine, how can the Peranakan jewelry best complement the kabaya?
Okay, actually the Nyonyas like to have complete sets of jewelry. Sometimes they really look like Christmas tree, you know. You must have from the earrings, you must have rings, you must have your pendants. Then, of course, the croissants, the bigger it is, the better, right? And sometimes they will show off their belts, the buckle, gold, or all around gold, or gold and silver. So, rings, so bracelets. So that's why they don't wear your kabaya with very long sleeve because you want to show off your bracelets too. So it's sort of, my mom used to tell me that it's a complete picture. If you don't put on some jewelry, then it's an incomplete attire. So they're a bit fussy about that. So that's why they have so many sets of jewelry. So if you're wearing, like say jade, you want a complete set of jade jewelry.
But what if some people not so rich, how? Not everybody all orang kaya.
Then buy costume jewelry lah.
Yeah, let's see, do we have any other questions? Okay, this one will be more for Norman. Certain pieces such as pearls and silver are reserved for funerals. Is there a way to wear these pieces when there's funeral, etc.? I think the main question is about the silver ones.
Okay, I think for pearl jewelry, traditionally is considered mourning jewelry, which we adopted from the British. I think we are about the only culture who actually adopt this custom of wearing mourning jewelry. So currently, because in those days, the Nyonyas mourn for 3 years, so definitely they will need some form of jewelry. Otherwise, you know, they can't live through the 3 years without any jewelry. So going back to today, 3 years mourning is no longer practiced. So what happened is that, what do you do with all this jewelry? You can still wear them when you attend maybe wake and all that. Maybe if you don't wear kabaya, you can you can take out a single brooch and just pin it onto your dress or your jacket. It's okay to wear, pearl pendant for the occasion as well. So it's still relevant today, if you want to wear mourning jewelry. But maybe if you don't wear kabaya, you can wear it in your modern outfit. Yeah. So that's my take. So there's some example of the mourning jewelry. A set of croissant with bird motif featured in my book. Yeah.
You'll be surprised, silver jewelry can be really very beautiful, and I think it's more easier to match with our modern day lifestyle rather than gold. So how would you use this in your modern wearing?
Okay, for example, actually most of the jewelry, even the gentlemen can wear it. Back in the old days, gentlemen actually only during their wedding, the groom will be heavily bedecked with jewelry. But in the current days, during wedding, we are dressed in the modern dress. Not many people wear jewelry. So for functions, you can always be creative. Like what I'm wearing now, actually I've got croissant, a full set of croissant.
So big, It
looks big, but
how
it's
many
an
diamonds
illusion.
are there?
It's an illusion. It's 3 pieces I combine into one. So there are many ways of wearing. Okay, so even like I've used ear studs, I've used as cuff links. Okay, I've also got the Nyonya buttons, which I converted to cuff links to use as well. So there's many ways of updating the look with old jewelry. And sometimes I would wear jeans. I would pair off with the silver Nyonya belt and buckle, which actually looks quite hip, quite modern. Yeah.
So for Chris, how do you match your jewelry in a modern way, other than wearing with kabaya?
Actually, I love to wear kabaya.
Huh? You only really wear with kabaya?
I really love to wear kabayas, yes.
Okay.
But generally, yes, I will also use it on my jeans skirt, my jeans pants, yes. And then if I have a plain dress, I can wear a kabaya over, and then have my brooch. Yeah. So I think there are many ways. So long as you start something and people follow you, you are successful in your fashion. Yeah.
That's good to know. Okay, let me see. We have time for only 2 questions. Let me see. Okay, this question here. Besides foundation jewelry, any reputable brand for reproduction Peranakan jewelry in Singapore? Any surviving reputable maker in Malaysia? Do you know of any?
Yeah, I must add that there's another jewelry shop called Kim Po Hong in North Bridge Road. They have got collections of vintage jewelry. Of course, it's pricey, but they have been doing this business for a long time. So they have got exquisite pieces of croissants, pendants with intans. So if you are happy, I think the shop is opposite Fook Hai building. So you can find, yeah, they've got nice selection. Yes, next to China Square. It's on the main road actually. Yeah.
Then we have the Changi Terminal Asian Artistry. Yeah. So they are actually young designers. So I think to convert the old to a new piece, they are able to do that, yes. Yeah,
so for myself, I have one last question for all 3 of you. The question is, right, when you produce such beautiful books with all your beautiful collection in it, are you afraid that people will start copying your design or culturally appropriate and create into something materially different? What are your views about this issue on cultural appropriating of the designs?
Okay, for me, when I do the book, it is to inspire people to recreate. It's an inspiration, but I don't think that they should be wholesale copying, because it shows that you do not spark their creativity. So my idea is to spark their creativity. But of course, my pieces, they're all antique pieces. Sometimes people really like the design, Then, I suppose there's no way to stop them from copying the design, because is one of a kind. Yeah. So.
Then what about for kebayas?
Oh, I have no qualms about it. If we have to move forward, I think we cannot keep it as a secret in our hearts. We have to share. So it doesn't matter. You can do the same design, but the workmanship will not be exactly the same. Because like this was done like more than 50 years ago. So you can probably get it something like that. So I have no problem about it, that we should share and we should continue to let others share with us. Then we can promote the culture.
True, true. Because if not for their so broad heart, right, I don't think in my early days in kebaya business, right, nobody wants to share information at all, which the culture went downhill, which I think that there are times that certain information needs to be shared and perpetuated to the younger generation. Yeah. So thanks Norman, Chris and Christine. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy your session.
Thank you, Raymond, Christine, and Norman and Chris for the very lively discussion. Please give us some time to change the microphone covers and to disinfect the mics. Yes, 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 you can come off. Okay, please put your hands together for the second panel, which will be moderated by Sean Seah and will comprise Josephine Chia, who will read from When a Flower Dies, Walter Woon, who will read from The Devil's Circle, and Robert Yeo, who will read from Roots, a Singapore Memoir, 1940 to 75. Thank you.
We will just remove our masks, all right? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome today to our panel. I think we are very privileged today to have three wonderful speakers with us. We have Robert Yeo, Josephine Chia, as well as Walter Woon. And so basically, you know, I think most of you came here to really ask them interesting questions and engage with them. But before we do that, so do reserve your questions to the end. I'll just paint a very quick outline about the panelists as well as some of the stories to be covering. Just a very brief sketch and an overview context. And then after that, I'll invite them to discuss a bit more and then to share a little bit more about the detail. We'll reserve about 15-20 minutes at the end for questions, okay? All right, so I must say I've had the great privilege of meeting them before, except for Walter. This is the first time meeting him, so it's a privilege for me. Robert Yeo actually contributed a chapter to my book called My Father's Kampong because he lived in Hougang at one point in time. And why am I telling you this? It's because his book, Roots, Robert, you have the book? Yeah, yep, hold it up and show them. The book Roots is about the first 35 years of his life where he lived in Hougang in the kampong. And it also, he has lived through a lot of interesting things in Singapore's history. And he's one of the most colorful personalities that I know. So later, I'll be inviting him to share a little bit more about that. All right. Second, we have Josephine Chia. Josephine is a wonderful person. When I was a young author just starting out, she encouraged me a lot, especially at times when I felt like giving up. Because, you know, when you're an author and you have to do a full-time job, it's not that easy. And so she encouraged me. She even referred me to the National Library, the wonderful people who kindly sponsored this venue. So I'm very grateful to her, personally grateful to her. And she will be sharing about her book. You've got it? Yes, When a Flower Dies. So this book is pretty interesting. It's a love story. It covers the story of a girl named Pansy who grows up in a seaside kampong. And in this seaside kampong, she inherits a love of nature, flowers, the sea, and all its healing qualities from her mother. And later, learning from English nuns, she also gains, the love of English, literature, and poetry. Sounds like somebody I know. And after that, there's a love story as well. I won't spoil it for you later. She'll be covering some of that. So lots of exciting stuff coming right up for you. Third, of course, last but definitely not the least, is Walter. Okay, so Walter has been among his many accomplishments. If I were to share all of them with you today, we'll be here till tomorrow. So I'll just summarize the few key interesting ones. He was at one point Singapore's ambassador to Germany for 6 years, I believe. And he also was a member of the high-level task force that drafted the ASEAN Charter in 2007. He was also at one point, I think between 2008 and 2010, Singapore's Attorney General. But that's not why you come to listen to him today. He's going to share about his book, The Devil's Circle. The Devil's Circle, which is a very exciting book about a gentleman named Baba Dennis Chiang, who basically tells the story of after what happens in the in the Japanese occupation. When the British returned to Singapore after the Japanese occupation, this is the exciting story about that. Later, I'll leave it to him to tell you more about it. But that's not all. You may have seen it last year on TV. Yes, he has a TV series. This land is mine. Not this land is mine, God gave this land to me. This land is mine. That's the TV series that he's got, and it's a pretty interesting one. So later, one of the questions you might want to ask, so I'm hinting here, is if you like to have your own TV series, you know who will have the best answer for you. All right, so without further ado, so what I'm going to do is kick it off by asking them a few simple questions. So enough from me, you came here to hear them. And then after each of them has gone around to share a little bit more, then we'll invite questions, all right? So please hold your burning questions to the end. Okay, maybe we go with ladies first for Josephine. Yes, Josephine, I really love reading your book. And I noticed that Pansy is a very interesting character, and she does remind me about somebody that I know. She has a love for English, literature, poetry, and so, people love reading about people and love hearing about people. Is it the case that some parts of the story were drawn from your life, perhaps? So could you share with us a little bit more?
The main character, the main character is... Thank you. The main character is Pansy, so she's in her 80s. And actually, it's a lot based on my mother, because I needed to talk about Pansy when she was already a teenager in this seaside kampong in the days where we had the old East Coast, not the present East Coast. Because the present East Coast is mainly already reclaimed land. And there were lots of kampongs along the Changi old East Coast. There are two things that are very important to me. One, I was born and brought up in a kampong. And then in the 70s and 80s, the kampongs were all demolished in Singapore. So then I went to do my master's degree in England, and I stayed on for 30 years. So when I came back to Singapore at the end of 2012, there are two things I realized. One, all the kampongs were gone, and someone really needed to document it. I felt that since I really grew up in a kampong, I can document it accurately. And then wrote the first kampong book, the Kampong Spirit. And then I also felt that when Violet was talking about identity, when I was living in England for 30 years, outside London, where there were no other Asian person, your identity becomes very important to you. And luckily, I was brought up a Peranakan. My mother always insisted that we were Peranakan. We were not just Chinese. So in the kampong, they used to call me OCBC, Orang Cina, bukan Cina. So I always felt myself as a Peranakan. So when I went to England and people asked me who I was, I decided that I would put the stamp on it. I am Peranakan. Don't call me Chinese. If there's an interviewer who interviews me, they must say I'm Peranakan. So that developed, and when I came back to Singapore, I, together with joining the Peranakan Association, I realized that this culture will eventually fade or die if people like us are not, promoting it all the time. So I decided that I write fiction and non-fiction, both for adults and children, that all my characters would be Peranakan characters. So that in some ways I will kind of show the existential angst of what it is to be a Peranakan today, what it is like to be a young Peranakan. So in one of my books, for example, a young boy, 16-year-old, and he doesn't know that he's Peranakan because a lot of Peranakans are now intermarrying. So the father is Peranakan, but the mother isn't Peranakan. In that kind of situation, it's very difficult for a child to learn about the Peranakan because it's usually the mother who teaches. So it's only in later years that he learned that he is Peranakan. So what is a Peranakan? And so this book, When a Flower Dies, explores these two things. One, about the death of the kampongs, which I love, although we were very poor, but the kampong life was a totally different life from today. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted also to talk about how the Peranakan culture can live through this Pansy and her interaction with the granddaughters.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Also, yes. Also, forgot to say that every time I see Josephine, she's always dressed and attired in the most beautiful sarong kebaya, right? So beautiful.
With different design. I just redesigned them myself with short sleeve and certain cotton material just so that I can wear it all the time, nearly all the time. Except when I even hiked up to the tiger's nest in a sarong kebaya, if you remember the article in Bhutan.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so now moving on to Robert. So Robert, you'll be sharing about your book Roots. It's a bit different from Josephine's book because hers is fiction, but yours is non-fiction. And in fact, Roots is not just R-O-U-T-S, it's also R-O-O-T-S, or roots. Relating to questions about identity, where you come from, and about history and heritage. So, okay, I know you could go on the whole day and you could do a lot of exciting stories, but if, say, we could limit it to one or two interesting anecdotes that would really energize the audience, well, what would it be? Yes, go ahead, Robert.
Okay, thank you. I must tell you how I came to write Roots. My grand aunt, whom I call Chimpo, she's no longer with us, one day told me a story about 4 Yo brothers who came from Sarawak, 4 brothers. And she said that one of the brothers agreed to marry a local woman. She didn't say from which ethnic group the woman came from. I like to presume she was probably a Dayak. But on the wedding day, this Yo brother who promised to marry this local woman didn't show up. And of course, the girl's family was absolutely furious and put a bomo, who put a curse on the Yo brothers, forcing them to flee Sarawak upon pain of their life. And that is how my paternal grandfather, Yo Tek Hock, and he's the eldest, ended up in Singapore. His 2 other brothers, one went to Tangkak, one went to Seramban. Oh yes, and the last one stayed in Singapore. So that gave me the idea of using the title for my book as Roots, because roots suggest 2 things to me. One is ancestry, and I've just talked about ancestry, my paternal grandfather. And the other one suggests journeys. I think if you are the son or daughters of diasporic Chinese in Southeast Asia, they would have come originally, if you're Hokkien, from Fukien, if you're Teochew, from the next county. And the routes that they would take to come to Singapore could be via Sarawak, via Manila, via Jakarta, via Myanmar, were Medan, right? Roots. And how would they have come to Singapore? Very unlikely in the 19th century they would have flown. They would probably have come by rail in continental Asia, or they would have come by ship. So I thought the word R-O-U-T-E-S is extremely rich. Okay, if I want to talk about an episode in my book, I would like to make a Malacca connection. Because for most Babas and Nyonyas, the Malacca is considered a kind of, what's the word I want to use? Like sort of the most important connection in Malaysia, Singapore. And on my mother's side, the paternal side, I'm lucky, I suppose, to be connected to the first family of Malacca, no less than Tan Cheng Lock. My paternal grandmother, Tan Guat Ki, was actually the second sister of Tan Cheng Lock. And I want to read you something that I've written in Roots about how at the age of 20, she married Un Itiam and lived in Katong. But when she married him, she met the stereotypical but very real figure of a cruel, guess what? Mother-in-law. So let me read this excerpt. Her husband then took her to Singapore to live with his family. The most miserable years of her life were under her stepmother. She put pressure on the new bride and made her do all the menial work while the mother-in-law herself lazed around. There was always a nagging, scolding, and strict mother-in-law who haunted her day and night. Her mother-in-law was an extremely quarrelsome and aggressive person. She was a bully and was extremely strict with her son's wife. I could go on. It's not a very pretty picture, but all right. Let me move on to another episode, which I think is common to people like myself who struggle with the fact that they're not able to speak a Chinese dialect well. And one of the reasons might be because they came into contact with someone who makes them feel inadequate about not being able to speak a Chinese dialect and speaking Baba Malay. Maybe I shouldn't read from the book. Let me just speak impromptu. I grew up in Hougang, and I used to go to a shop patronized by the mother of someone who was a prominent Teochew in Hougang, T. Tua Ba. T. Tua Ba's mother used to own a provision shop, and I used to go and buy things from her, and I would hesitate to speak with her in Teochew because my Teochew wasn't very good. So I would speak to her in Malay, and she would get enraged with me. So I was sort of taken aback by this scolding, you know, and sort of asked myself, is there something wrong with me not being able to speak a Chinese dialect? I mean, I could go on, but I think that was the source of, how should I say, that was the source of the fact that I did not properly pick up a Chinese dialect. And then, of course, I went to school at the age of 6 and picked up English. And after that, English became my mother tongue. I could go on, but I'll stop there, just telling you 2 anecdotes, which are sort of very typically the story of a Baba boyhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Sorry to hear about that sad story, but I also kena before. First, I was serving my NS and I was queuing up to give in my pink IC for a green IC. That's the NS 11B. And the chief clerk, when the chief clerk heard my voice, she said, "You are orang Cina bukan Cina," and then she immediately followed up by saying, "I bet you don't know how to speak Chinese." She was right. So, okay, now but moving on, last but certainly not the least, we have Walter. I think it's also interesting to know that Walter's book, The Devil's Circle, is part of a series. It's, I believe it's the final installment in a series known as the Advocate's Devil. Not the Devil's Advocate, the Advocate's Devil. And so here to tell us more about it is Walter. So Walter, perhaps you could share maybe a little bit about your book, perhaps situating it in the historical context of the story, as well as also situating it in relation to your other books as well.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for bothering to turn up. The primary motivation for writing this was because I got fed up of writing law books. And I needed some distraction. This series of books, there are actually three different themes. One is culture and identity, which we've heard from all our speakers, because we, as Baba Nyonya people, have always faced this question of who are we? What are we? That was the first thing. The second thing is my interest in history, specifically military history, because I had a very warlike childhood. My father was interested in military things, so the house was full of books about the Second World War, which he lived through. And I actually did dedicate one of the books to my dad, who lived through all of this. And many of the things I wrote about come from my dad. Little snippets there, right? The third thing is, of course, law. And I have some students, my ex-students in the audience, and this may bring back bad memories, but yes, there are bits of law in there. I'm not the only author who's ever done that. If you read Vikram Seth, The Suitable Boy, for example, you see that Vikram Seth does infuse law into that, right? As Sean says, this is not a standalone book. It is part of a series that covers from 1937 to 1945. And that, you know, is when the sun set on the British Empire, when Singapore fell and the Japanese came and occupied Singapore. But if you've read the English literature of that period, it is always a white voice. It is the white man talking. And we, the natives, are sort of in the shadows with minor players. We're not there. And that was one of the reasons that I wrote this, right? When we talk about culture and identity, the leitmotif of these books is really the search for identity by Dennis Chiang, the protagonist. He is brought up as a Baba, right? But his uncle, who's his guardian, decides he should be an English gentleman, right? At a time when gentleman meant more than just a sign on a lavatory door. So he gets sent off to England, public school, Cambridge. He comes back, a stranger in his home and his homeland, to a society of cascading snobbery, with the whites on top. Then you have the Babas. Then you have the Singke. The Babas look down on the Singke. And then below that you have the others, right? So his first experience of racism is actually here, in this kind of society, right? We tend, I think, to have a misplaced idea, a misplaced nostalgia for colonialism, forgetting what it was actually like. And with respect to our esteemed guest of honor, Ms. Un, I was in her restaurant yesterday. And I noticed with interest coronation chicken, which was a dish that was cooked up for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth 1952, and this is part of our colonial legacy. But the interesting thing is that when the Queen became Queen in 1952, there were whites-only clubs in Singapore. You look out from the Supreme Court which is where the National Gallery is. Cricket Club, whites only. Tanglin Club, whites only. Royal Singapore Golf Club, whites only. That was the reality. That was the reality. Right? So when we talk about the devil circle, why the devil circle? It starts off with Dennis coming back. He gets involved as a lawyer, as the devil for his mentor, Clarence d'Almeida, who's actually one of the main protagonists. He's the devil. He's the assistant, the devil to d'Almeida. He gets involved in this. He meets the communists. He represents the communists. He helps the communists. He meets a girl called Siu Chin, who is Chinese Ed, and she questions his identity. Orang Cina bukan Cina, right? And various things happen, but she leaves. The second book, The Devil to Pay, actually covers the fall of Singapore. This is the point where he meets the Indian National Army. Well, not the Indian National Army, but Indian troops fighting for the British. And the British do not treat them with respect. They treat them with disdain. He meets Habibullah, who is one of these people, right? Two threads. He also meets a girl called Daphne Ford. Now, when Siu Chin leaves, his heart's not actually broken, but it's severely dented. Then he meets this American girl, Daphne, and he falls in love with her. And various things happen, but at the end of the book, he gets separated from her. And then we have The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, which is during the occupation, right, where he meets Siu Chin again, because she's part of this communist resistance. And then he meets another girl, not quite yet, actually. He meets Siu Chin again, so you have that bit as well. And then finally, Devil Circle, where all the threads come back. The return of the British, the return of the King Emperor, the whole question of who's a collaborator and who's not a collaborator, where does your loyalty lie? The book is built around two trials, a trial of a Japanese Kempeitai torturer and the trial of Habibullah, who was a British officer, an officer of the Indian Army, but became an officer in the Indian National Army. And people tend to forget the Indian National Army is part of our history, right? And there was even a regiment called the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, all women, recruited here in Malaya, in Singapore. And that the Indian independence was proclaimed here in Singapore in 1943 by Subhash Chandra Bose in Cathay Building. Singaporeans have forgotten that history. And that was one of the reasons I wrote this. Why Devil Circle? Apart from all these threads coming back, the British, remember, they surrendered. When it surrendered, it was the biggest defeat the British had ever suffered. And when they came back, they didn't conquer Singapore. The Japanese had surrendered, so they came back without defeating the Japanese. And they had this problem that the whole edifice of white rule depended on that idea of white superiority, which had been totally destroyed. How do you bring it back? The harder you squeeze, the quicker they go, right? So there is rebellion, there's disaffection, there are people who are disloyal. If you squeeze them, they will go. The harder you squeeze, the quicker they go. It is what in English is called a vicious circle. In German, however, there is the word Teufelskreis, which means literally devil's circle. So that is why we have the devil's circle. Right? So I've gone on too long. Back to you,
nice
Sean.
timing. Thank you very much. A hand, please. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Walter. Okay, so you have heard from them. They have given you a brief sketch of their books, but I think what you really come here for is the engagement and the asking them questions part. Okay, so may I have set down a few simple rules? Identify yourself, even when you want to key it in, that's fine as well, just identify yourself, and also specify who your question is intended for. If you don't, we'll just assume it's meant for the panel, and then they can freestyle answer. Huh? I think let's keep it a bit informal and engaging. because I see some of you raring to go, took out phones already. Okay, so let's give it a while. But maybe, just 1 second, sir. I just answered the first question. So the first question is, where can we buy these amazing books? And the answer is right here, right now. You can go over there after this to buy the books. As a local author myself, as a local writer myself, I always pitch this everywhere I go. If the audience doesn't support local writers and doesn't buy our books, basically, then yeah, it just doesn't work. So please have the heart to support our books. So it's over there, go and buy it after this, all right? Everybody buy 5 copies each, huh? Okay, you sir, go ahead.
Right, thank you for that question. We have the producers of the TV series actually here, TJ and Spivey Sin, right? No, the TV series and the book are not the same. They borrowed the names of the characters, but the plots are very much different. If you've ever watched, for example, I, Robot with Will Smith, and you've read Isaac Asimov's book, you see all they did was borrow the names, right? Or you're a fan of Japanese anime, you have Miyazaki Goro's Earthsea, the Tales of Earthsea. Ursula Guin, who wrote that, said it's actually a different book, a different work. And I pay tribute and credit to TJ, because his work stands on its own. One big difference is that I told you that Dennis was devil to Dalmeda. Dalmeda, unfortunately, had a heart attack. The actor playing Dalmeda had a heart attack, and so couldn't carry on, and that completely threw off everything, because he was such a key character. So it's different. And the themes that I mentioned, the theme of loyalty, the Indian National Army, cannot be explained easily to a TV audience, even in 15 episodes. The fact that there was a non-communist resistance, in fact a Kuomintang resistance as opposed to communist resistance, is not something you can explain in 15 minutes, right? So, sorry, 15 episodes, excuse me, not 15 minutes. So there were a lot of these themes that did not get into that, which is why the book and This Land Is Mine, not the same. Right? And where they got that title from, you have to ask MediaCorp. They went and dreamt it up. I have no idea where it came from. No, it didn't actually. If you're talking about Exodus, the song Exodus, I don't think it did, frankly, because Exodus is Jewish immigration into Palestine after the war. But there it is. It is what it is. But thank you for the question.
And that is why you must support the book. All right, can we have another question? Yeah. Or we can put up the questions on the screen as well. Okay, there we go. I'll give it a moment. Okay. Shall we, okay, so we've heard from Walter. Shall we deal with one of these first and we'll get to you? Okay, 1 second. Maybe we will direct one to since Walter has answered already, let's go for Josephine, to Miss Josephine. What theme would you like to see in the Peranakan literary scene that has not yet been explored?
I'm not sure whether there are literary works, or rather in fiction, that explore a lot of Peranakan themes. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. In fiction, I'm not sure if there are any. I know Kenneth has written a book totally in Baba Malay, and it's fictional, but I'm not sure if there are. Walter, is your characters are not mainly Peranakan, right?
Nope, yeah. Only the main character.
Only the main character. So, so the kind of themes that I've been exploring is about the transition of the culture. How do we pass our culture to the young? In this situation, I have Pansy, who is a Peranakan lady, and she has 3 daughters. One is a lawyer, one is a doctor, and one is an accountant. So the youngest one, Goldie, she wants to be, she tries to be fine herself. So she tries to dress in what her mother calls like a lesbian. She dresses in black, she wears her hair cropped and all that kind of thing. She's going through an identity thing. But throughout the situation with her grandmother, she begins to identify with the Peranakan. So mainly the themes that I would like to see in future books for younger writers is whether we can promote the Peranakan culture, whether we can see a future where the Peranakan culture will still be talked about in the future. Because I think that because of the intermarrying between the Peranakans and all, this kind of thing is dying. So may I just read a short excerpt about from Goldie,
Sure.
what she's saying? Because Goldie, as I said, initially she wanted to be defiant of her mom. So she dressed, in a kind of with belts and all kinds of silver studs and all that. And then her grandmother made her think about it. And then she's asked this question. This is in Goldie's voice. What is culture all about? Is culture about one's color or features, or how one would address one's parents or grandparents? Is Peranakan culture just about dressing up in a sarong kebaya, or talking in a Peranakan patois, or cooking and eating ayam buah keluak, and knowing how to make nasi ulam and arranging the bunga rampai? Or is it about knowing how to embroider or the ability to thread glass beads onto kasut manit? Does culture contribute to who she is? Does it matter? Then Goldie started to think about herself and she said, oh my God, we've become a uniform subspecies of a tribe, of a global tribe. The thought of her belonging to this featureless global youth, existing on a diet of part Western values, raised on Western pop, and knowing no Asian culture, engaging in impersonal communication through emails and blogs and social medias, seemed colorless when her own inherited culture is so rich and vibrant. She sits in front of her dressing table mirror and examines herself. What does she look like, for God's sake? She's nothing but an imitation of some Western idea of a hip youngster. Is she having an identity crisis? Goldie ruffles her hair to take the spikiness out of it. Then slowly she takes out all the numerous ear studs and from her earlobes and her nose and everything. Something in Goldie is beginning to bloom. And I think that is what I want to nurture in the young, that there is something wonderful about our culture that must live on. So we are on the way out, the elder Merdeka and pioneer generation people, and hopefully we can leave something behind to inspire the young to write about it. So I would like young writers to take up this theme and work it into their stories. So essentially all of my books try to work on these themes and say, is there any hope for us as Peranakan for this culture to continue into the next millennium?
Thank you. Just now there was a question there. Okay, maybe ladies first. Could we get a mic? Yes. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Daisy Chua. My question is addressed to Professor Woon. I am still mulling over this issue. It's a question of this intangible called identity or ethnicity. So by being a Peranakan, is it one of identity or one of ethnicity? I also vaguely recall that I read something that you wrote, Professor Woon, but if I get it wrong, you tell me. You said that there's no pure Peranakan or something, that one only take on the trappings of being a Peranakan. So I'm not sure whether, when you said that, is it referable to a Peranakan tile or is it referable to something? So is it linked together with a question of identity, a question of ethnicity? Let me hear your take on this. It's a difficult question, but I've been mulling over it. What is it like to be being a Peranakan? Is it a question of identity or question of ethnicity? Or did I just take on the trapping as elaborated by Josephine, wearing sarong, all the trappings of being a Nyonya? What is it?
Thank you. We could spend the whole day discussing this and even write a thesis on this, but no, very shortly. I believe that being Baba Nyonya is a question of choice, not a question of ethnicity. You cannot inherit culture. You cannot inherit culture. Mostly, the culture was passed on from mother to daughter, mostly. And the emancipation of women put an end to a lot of it. The domestic culture, the Christianization of the community also diluted that culture because, the old ancestor worship has gone. We choose, I think, to identify ourselves as Baba Nyonya. Why not ethnicity? Because, as our guest of honor pointed, we've all got Indonesian blood, not Malay. I don't believe it's Malay. The language we speak, Bahasa Baba, the words we use, the vocabulary we use is Indonesian. It is not Malay. You talk about sendok, not sudu. You talk about kepiting, not ketam. You talk about, ranjang, not katil. Right? So the words we use, the pronunciation of these words is Indonesian, not Malay. Right? Maybe there is such a thing as a pure blood Chinese Baba or Nyonya, but I would say that's a very rare creature. Right? Somewhere in our past, we have intermarried. My family left China 2 centuries ago during the reign of the Emperor Chia-Cheng. Right? 2 centuries ago. The Chinese women did not come out. And men being men, they're not going to be celibate. Right? They're not going to be celibate. Right? So there it is. I would say we choose. Just one last word, if I may. My wife and I, we lived in Bonn, in Berlin, and in Brussels for 9 years. We chose, when we entertained, to use Nyonya cuisine. She wore the kebaya, and I wore this batik. Right? And they knew we were not Indonesians for sure. They knew what we were. We chose to identify ourselves as Baba Nyonya. Because that is Singapore. It is Singaporean. It is our culture. It is not somebody else's. And one day we will get this inscribed on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural List.
Sounds wonderful. Before we get to Ronnie's question, oh sure, go ahead. Yeah. Are you on? Yeah. Is it working? Yeah, it is working.
Sorry, maaf. Because actually in the Sejarah Melayu it is mentioned several times that there were a lot of Minangkabau women who were sent from Indonesia to Malaya at that time, and they were within the palace as waiting ladies or as the lady in waiting or whatever to help to keep the princesses and the queens and all that company. So they were some of these women. The intermarriage were also with some of these Minangkabau women, a lot of Indonesian women as well. So that is the reason why there are a lot of Indonesian words in our Baba Malay.
And maybe we can also get a quick comment from Robert also on this identity, whether it's ethnicity or culture.
Can you hear me? Yeah. When I was studying Baba culture, and I wrote a little thesis when I did a course in linguistics in the RELC, I thought that one of the great diluters of Baba culture, I'm not saying that dilution of Baba culture is necessarily a bad thing, because I think it happens and you can stop it or you cannot stop it. But I think one of the great diluters of Baba culture is marriage. The Baba male marrying a woman who does not speak the Baba language. And so if that is the case, the language, the customs, the food is not passed down to the next generation. And I think marriage is a great culprit. But I'm not using the word culprit to blame marriage, because I think dilution, or you can call it dilution, I would prefer to call it, what is it? I mean, like the natural process of assimilation, of change. If you take my case, I'm Baba, but again, we need to identify what is meant by Baba, because the notion that some people have floated of pure Baba is, I think, a lot of nonsense. Okay, what identifies a Baba or a Nyonya? I think one is ancestry. Is your father Baba, your mother Nyonya? That's one. Two, preference for food. In other words, the main cuisine would be Baba Nyonya food. The third is the ability to speak the language. And the fourth, I think, would be mode of dress. The preference for the Nyonya to wear the sarong kebaya. So if you have these four markers, then you qualify as a Baba or a Nyonya. But you may have one or two, and does that still make you a Baba or a Nyonya? I think this is something we can talk about. But looking at this question of change and assimilation, I think marriage is a major factor. Marriage to someone, if you are male, Baba, marriage to someone who is not a Nyonya is a major factor in change. That's what I want to say.
Okay. Quick point, all right. Yeah, then we must get to Ronnie because I promised him. Yes, go ahead. Mike, please.
Okay, maybe can I use my own family experience? And sometimes, in trying to be too deep, you kill the culture. My daughter identifies herself as a Peranakan woman because she's loud like the mother. And this poor boy, my son, is the victim of two Peranakan women, and that is the family dynamics of a Peranakan family. Now, she has identified herself as wanting to keep the food alive because of me. Yeah? And I think I'll give you an example of Ralph Lauren in America. He is not the American icon, but he has adopted all those American, he represents in his fashion what America is. He represents the prairie robe. And so I think you do need some shallowness. That song, Shallow. Because if you are shallow, it will perpetuate. You know, my daughter got married, and her tea ceremony was in my mother's sarong kebaya from Pekalongan. You know, and she doesn't speak Malay, does she? She couldn't care less. You know, but to her, she's a Peranakan woman. And I think this is the way to, you know, if you're so deep, people cannot understand. And you know, then you say, I don't speak the language, so I'm not. As far as she's concerned, she's a feisty Peranakan woman. And that distinguishes our culture, like the mother. You know, am I going to be am I a horrible mother-in-law? I don't think so, lah. But you know, but the point is that then she has taken it upon herself to the restaurants are not my children helping me, you know. They started it in 2012 because they wanted to preserve this heritage. And I think we've taken our food and we've made it very elegant, so that I think Walter has been overseas, right? I've been overseas in missions, and I said, why are we always seen like lowly food? You know, the way we serve. And I went in 1988 to America on 8 cities to do, you know, and I was in Kishore Mahbubani's embassy, and you know, and as well as Tomiko, and I insisted that we have to serve our food beautifully. You know, and in that you raise your culture. You know, when we did our restaurant in National Gallery, I think everybody got a shock, including the authorities. They expected a coffee house. That shows you how they respect your culture. Other people don't respect your culture. Too bad, you respect it. Why do you care about other people's validation of you? That's not important. And I think when you look at Ralph Lauren, it's fantastic. He has captured the American spirit in his designs, in his house, but he's not that, you know. That's not his life. So maybe you need people to capture that spirit, and the culture will live without us. And I think that's very important. That's my point.
Thank you for the sharing. We've got about 5 minutes left, so maybe let's group a few last burning questions together. Come,
Okay,
Ronnie, please.
I just want to say, let's not forget our roots. We came from China, we spoke Hokkien, and later we spoke Malay, and now we're speaking English. And let all this heritage thing, let it evolve by itself. Let it go through a natural course by itself. Let's not commercialize it too much, right? And she's, as Violet said, let's not overkill the culture thing. So, for me, my son cannot speak more than 20 Baba Malay words because we did not transmit to him. My wife is not very good in Baba Malay, okay? Because she spoke mostly English with the grandmother and all that. So, I myself can speak very good Baba Malay. I probably can debate with Walter Wood in Baba Malay. I'll probably lose to him anyway, right? But what I'm saying is that going forward, we should be concentrating not just on what I call Baba English, but we are talking about Singapore English. There's no way it's going to be a new layer of a dialect called Baba English. I don't think it will ever happen. So what I'm saying is, let just things flow by itself. Just like a kabaya and all that. It will slowly, Raymond will start doing all kinds of fashions, and let the ladies accept what kind of fashions he puts at them, and that is how culture will evolve. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I think that is one of the points that Robert has raised before, that we are slowly evolving towards a Singapore identity. He's mentioned that before. So, okay, maybe let's just read through the questions. We'll group up a few. Maybe we will target those that are to all of them. All right, so to the panel, what advice would you give to aspiring young writers who want to become published authors and write about Peranakan culture? That's one. Shall we group that also with, while we are doing that, should we also promote Peranakan culture as Singapore's exact culture? That's kind of related to the point that was being discussed. So, all right, come. Do you have any views? So what advice would you give young authors? And number two, should we promote Peranakan culture as Singapore's exact culture? That's the wording of the question. Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure what they mean.
Exact culture.
I'm not sure what they mean by exact culture. Sorry.
Yeah, is it working?
Hello? I got it, thanks. Not sure what exact culture is, but it is Singapore culture. It is Singapore, and it does evolve. Any culture that does not evolve is dead, right? So it does evolve. I'm sure it's different. The language evolves as well, but the problem that we have is that nobody speaks Bahasa Baba anymore naturally. And to try to force people to do that, I think is not possible. If you ask about writing about Peranakan culture, I don't believe there is such a thing as a Peranakan literature. There's Singapore literature where the characters happen to be Baba Nyonya, and that may inform their actions, it may form part of their background. But to actually try to write Baba, Peranakan, probably not feasible, but let me not hog this.
Yes, last few comments from Josephine and Robert. Yeah.
Just a quick combination for those who want to study writing. There are lots of creative writing classes in Singapore run by the library and the National Art Councils, because I run the workshops myself. So if you want to be a writer, whether we write as, I think that a writer has to be true to themselves. So you have to know your subject, whether it's about the kampong or about life in Singapore or just about the Peranakan culture. For me, because I had always had a personality crisis about who I am, whether being a Peranakan or not, I tend to write about those things. And that's how I came to write about Peranakan, using Peranakan cultures to express those things in my books.
Robert?
Yes, hear me? Yes, I admire Josephine for being very focused in writing pretty much about a Peranakan culture. I was thinking of a book about Potong Pasir, her mother, which is very Peranakan, and I was thinking also about when a flower dies. My own position has been stated by Walter that I think if you're talking about writing, Singapore writing in English, you can choose to write about Singapore things, or you can choose deliberately, and it's a matter of choice, to write about Singapore things with a Peranakan culture. My own particular bent is not to write in particular about Peranakan culture, but to write as a post-1965 writer, someone who has been influenced by colonial education and what happened after 1965. I would say that these two things, colonial education, I was born in 1940, I did my A-levels in 1956, largely colonial. Of course, then I went to the University of Singapore in 1957, and things began to change. So my own predilection as a writer is that of someone I see as a modern Singapore writer who is free to choose whatever themes attract him. And it is part of Singapore literature in English. We've got to remember that we are a multilingual country, and that Singapore literature is written in Tamil, in Chinese, and in the Malay language. That's my position.
Thank you very much, Walter. Okay, a round of applause for all three of them. I would like to thank them very much for spending your weekend here with me. And I want to thank you, the audience, as well. From the questions behind, you can see that although I actually reserved quite some time for Q&A, too many burning questions lah. So later, grab a hold of them and you can definitely ask them the questions. But last but not least, I'm going to end off with my usual pitch. After this, remember to support their books. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, Walter, Josephine, and Robert for the very cerebral discussion. We will now have a 5-minute break. The third panel will be moderated by Kenneth Chan and will comprise Genevieve Peggy Jeffs, who will read from her grandmother, Queenie Chang's autobiography, Memoirs of a Nyonya, and Ruth Chia, Linda Kao, and So Tiang King, who will read from Chia An Siang and Family, The Tides of Fortune.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Wow, the previous panel was some serious discussion. Huh? I'm afraid we're not going to be so serious this time. Okay, so, all right, so let's begin. We have here, on this panel, we're going to talk about 2 books. 3, including mine, actually, but yes. Okay, the first book is Memoirs of a Nyonya by Queenie Chang. Now, if you didn't already know, Queenie Chang is of course not with us anymore. So instead, in her place, we have her granddaughter. This is Genevieve Peggy Jeff over here. Okay, speak closer. Okay, so to begin with, I thought I would tell you what this book is about before we talk to the granddaughter. Yeah. Memoirs of a Nyonya. Queenie Chang's memories are all the more remarkable because she's a remarkable woman, and also because she has a fascinating story to tell. She tells it warmly, enthusiastically, and authentically. Queenie is a Nyonya who went to a Dutch school and became foreignized. However, she never forgot her Nyonya origin. She spoke Malay as well as a Chinese dialect, Kek. And during her school vacations in Penang, picked up a smattering of Nyonya Hokkien. So, who is Queenie Chang? She is a Nyonya But she's not just any ordinary Nyonya. She is someone who's met all kinds of historical figures in her most illustrious life. Let me just read a few excerpts from this book so you get a sense of who she is. Mr. Lee Kong Chiang. If you didn't know, this whole building is dedicated to him. True to his word, visited us. Big Brother took him to meet Papa, on whom our friend made a most favorable impression. Papa asked Big Brother to show him around. Papa had offered Mr. Lee a scholarship to the Hong Kong University. But when he returned to Singapore, Mr. Lee wrote to Big Brother that he had taken up an offer of a job in a shoe factory. It was owned by Tan Ka Ki, another prominent Peranakan. And it doesn't end there. Papa celebrated his jubilee in 1916. So who was this Papa that Queenie Chang was always talking about? Well, if you didn't know, Papa was in fact the Kapitan Cina of Medan. And being Kapitan Cina of Medan back then was a big thing, a very, very big thing. The program consisted of a whole week of recreation and enjoyment. The mornings were occupied with visits from the different communities. Arabs, Indians, Sikhs, and Malays came in national attire to pay their respects. Then there were delegates from the various associations. School children from different towns enjoyed a free ride in the train to come to Medan to attend the celebrations. It was a holiday for everyone. The populace remembered well Chong Afi had done for all the peoples of all races, and their spontaneous tributes were most gratifying. It was as if everybody wanted to honor the great man in recognition for his justice and charity. And that is who Queenie Chang was. Now, we can all read about Queenie Chang, but big question is, what was she really like? So, Peggy, as the granddaughter of the most illustrious Queenie Chang, full of adventure, meeting all these historical figures, what was she really like in person? Who was she? Who was she to you? Could you tell us a little bit about your grandmother?
Growing up, I think we had that kind of fear because, after all, she's a grand dame. You know? I think the whole family, even whether brothers or sister or in-law, when she married to a very well-known family in Taipei. Even now, when you go to Taipei, the Lin's Garden, L-I-N, that's we call Lim, is open for the tourists to visit. So they respected her just the same as the eldest daughter-in-law in Taipei. So for us, she, at that time, she didn't live in Singapore and is traveling between Indonesia to Europe to passing by Singapore. And as a kid, I remember we used to go to receive her from the port to send her when she go away. And it's always like a guest to us at home. So we will have to learn to serve her. Even I remember the rambutan, we have to cut away the skin and place it nicely and put in the fridge before we serve. So it's kind of fear. But as I grow up as an adult and my first marriage, and of course she's at the wedding as one of the guests, and she's very happy. Because my first marriage, the family is also Peranakan, and she's very happy to communicate with them, especially she speaks so many languages. I mean, besides Dutch, English, Indonesian, Hakka, Hokkien. I think she also speaks German. But at home, we always we always were listen to Dutch or Indonesian language. And why I say French, because my father is the only son of Queenie, and he was sent to Switzerland for the education when he was about 7 or 8 years old, until as a grown man, then he came back to Southeast Asia. So most of the time when he was talking to the family or to friends is in French. So these are the languages that we always hear when we grow up. So if you ask me whether I speak Baba Malay, I can't. Yeah, but Indonesian, yes, a little bit, and I can communicate when I'm there, but not the local Baba language.
Sounds like she had a lot of influence on you,
Yes.
very international. Has she had any influence on you today?
I think very quick glance, my elder sister and I, we both look more like her in terms of the eyes, the feature, and also the dressing. We like to dress up. We like jewelry. I mean, she used to wear rings, all fingers. I remember as an adult, I happened to know this air steward was on the way back, came back from London. So I said, I didn't know. If I know, I will ask you to look after my grandmother on the way to London. He said, I know which one. Is it fingers? All the rings with fingers. I said, yes, that's the one. He said, okay, she's well looked after.
Just from reading the book and meeting you for the first time in person,
Yeah.
instantly I connected the
You
dots
can,
and I went,
yeah.
yes,
Yes.
I can see that you are in fact the granddaughter of Queenie Chang.
And
that's
in
very-
Medan, they always, when I was young, they always say, oh, this is a Chong, you know. But actually, my surname is Lim because Queenie married to Lim. So my father is Lim and I'm Lim. Yeah.
Now the book ended, of course it was written a long time ago, so I'm actually very curious, and I'm sure a lot of the readers are very curious too. What happened to Queenie Chang after that? Because it kind of ended on not a very positive note that she was unable to come to Singapore. Your father was unable to secure a visa for her to live in Singapore at that time. So what happened afterwards when the book ended?
Actually, my father passed away when I was 12. So we were all very young. So maybe that's why we never see her living in Singapore with us. We 5 brothers and sisters, we were born here. But the older two, the older sister and brother, they went to Medan and lived there for a while. So, towards the older age, was she still writing? I remember sometimes she visited Singapore. She's always on the typewriter, typing, she's writing. But here she's older age. My eldest brother felt that she's alone there in Medan. I mean, the home is very big, if you all have visited Chong Afi Mansion. But there are other, my uncles, grand-uncles, they're there, and their children. So it might not have a particular person to pay attention to her, except the maid. So my eldest brother feel that it should be bringing her to Singapore to stay with us. So at the end, she died in Singapore at the old age. But I must say, throughout the time that she lived in Singapore at old age, her time is always reading. Is always spending time in the room reading. So she's always read the books, the novels or something. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'm wondering, enough about us. How about you? Do you have any questions for the granddaughter of Queenie Chang?
Pat, did you really have a chance to engage with your grandma?
Yes.
Or your mother?
Growing up?
Yeah,
Yes.
growing up.
Yes, yes.
So in what ways, for instance?
I remember when she was matchmade at the age of 16 to the Lim family.
Yeah.
She couldn't understand the mother-in-law is bounded feet. She told us that she actually embroidered the shoe top for her. But when she arrived, she realized that the feet were so small. So this is a kind of experience I think she learned. She didn't know or understand the Chinese culture at that time because she's from Medan and was Dutch educated. So as growing up, sometimes she would talk to us about the experience. Yeah.
Was it difficult for her to adjust, coming from Indonesia to Taiwan?
I think at so young age, yes.
To adjust, yes.
Yeah, but I think as a strong lady, she learned. And from there, she learned. When she got married, the sister-in-law, she couldn't communicate with the sister-in-law about the same age. So she learned to speak Mandarin, Chinese, and writing in Chinese. Yeah.
Truly remarkable woman.
Yeah.
Any more questions, please?
Vivi, I'm just wondering why this long haul love. She's in Medan, but she's married maybe a prominent family in Taiwan. How come the connection? Is it childhood sweetheart or what?
No.
It's such a long haul thing, you know.
Yes,
So I'm just
it's
wondering where.
both parents matchmake the family. So one side of the girl, the daughter, married to Queenie's brother. And then she married to, so it's like a double marriage. So my grand auntie that I know is actually married to Chong, and is also my grand auntie as Lim. So the relationship become very close on both sides.
We have a question from the audience. Peggy, will you be writing an autobiography too?
I would love to say I'm too old to write, but I think I shouldn't say that because my grandmother, wrote so many books from young till her old age. So I think that's not the excuse. I don't know why. And so many people ask me the same thing. When she published the book, she was invited to Singapore for the book fair, and that was, I think, 1981. I remember I carried my son as a child to very subtle. I queue up as the same as anybody, just queue up for the autograph. And at that time already, I had friends that said, why don't you carry on from there and write? So I never did. I think that would be my regrets. Yeah.
I think you're still young, and there's plenty more time. Well, we look forward to an autobiography someday.
I need all the guidance. So I'm now with all the authors. Maybe I say you right.
All right then. Yes, Ronnie.
Peggy, can I ask? You grew up in a life of extreme luxury, right? Did you ever regret that you lived such a life of privilege? Did you see what life was outside the house of Chong Ah Fee?
I never feel that way. And that's why I have been doing fundraising and charity work, I should say all my life, because if you ask me my career, I'm not doing anything, but it's just to help to fundraise. So I think this is part of it's in the blood that both sides of the family are all very charitable. If you read about Chong Ah Fee, how they, to donate to the underprivileged, as well as if you learn about the Lim family, it's just the same. There's all about fundraising and charity to the underprivileged. So I think I will live my life with no regrets.
Okay, we have one more question from the audience. Peggy, what's your fondest memory of Queenie that left the strongest impression on you?
I think I admire her life, which I don't think I reached there. I admire that, and she never, when she talked to us, there's never have any complaint or talk about, even if we write as a kid, she will say, you have no strength, your writing is no strength, you should practice more, things like that. But that's why I feel that we have this certain fear and respect to her when we see her. Yeah.
So essentially, she was a typical Nyonya, very strict, insisting on the right way.
Eating of the right way, yes, but we never get scolding or anything, no. That's not, yeah. And as I say, I think we also look at her, she always dressed so nice, going out with big orchid, and I also dress that way, so from young that we see, yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question, okay?
No, always with orchid, big and a few orchid, yeah. When that's where I remember her, yeah.
Okay, Peggy, did Queenie inspire your prolific fundraising activities? I think you kind of answered that already. But
as I say, I have answer is from the family as well, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, okay. Queenie Chang. The next book on our panel is about Chia Ansiang and the family. Now, this book is very uniquely written in the sense that it was written by the three descendants of Chia Ansiang, and it was written in three different parts with three different perspectives about the family. So we're very interested in hearing their take on it, and I'll save my questions for later. Perhaps we could start with Ruth. Could you talk about what is your section about, and tell us a little bit about the book?
My section is about the Chia family coming to Southeast Asia in My story is about the Chia family who has been here for 250 years. Our first ancestor left China in 1774. I always wondered, why did he leave? Was it for adventure, or was it he had to leave because of some romantic alliance? Contrary to the common belief that the immigrants left China for a better life, does not apply to our first generation, Chia Donghi. He was the second son. As a second son in a Chinese family, you have no responsibilities. And his family was very rich because two members of the family were advisors to Emperor Qianlong court. So why did he leave? That question always is in my mind. But the Zupu of our genealogy recorded that he had his first son when he was 29 years old. What happened before that? As a man, right? So, but anyway, he had a late marriage, and the four sons in the Zupu was documented, and one of the sons was born in China but never came out to Malacca. It was a Chinese custom in those days that when a child is born in a family, they usually match them to another rich family. So, and also there's also another custom, the unusual custom is that they will take a poor girl from some family, which is older than the son, to look after him and be his companion. So that's where the romantic license came in, I thought. So anyway, he had 4 sons of his own, and my great-grandfather, the father of Chia Ang Sang, was his 3rd son. The business that they were doing, because he came from a rich family, was shipping, trading commodities between the Spice Islands and China. So their network in China was very strong, owing to their family connection. When Tiong Hee died, Po Eng took over the business. But Po Eng was very lucky, for in those days there were pirates everywhere. Somehow or other, by sheer chance, he became very famous among the pirates. You read it in my book. I won't say very much. Anyway, he married at he married at the age of 24 to a Chinese family, and he had 8 sons. And in Melaka, he also started the horse and carriage business. It's a transport business, and it's very lucrative. Because I read in some travel book that to hire a carriage and a horse for one day, it will cost $5 a day. That is a hell of a lot of money. So in 1819, when Raffles came to Singapore, he invited the businessmen and merchants from Melaka to come down to Singapore. Po Eng and his associate came down to Singapore, and he brought 4 of his sons with him, the 4 oldest sons. The 4 younger sons was left in Melaka. So it is quite a pity because we don't know who they are. So Po Eng, the sons actually continued with the father's business, the 2 oldest sons. But the 3rd son, who's my great-grandfather, Chia Ang Siang, decided that he wanted to be a commodity trader. So he joined Bausted. He rose very fast in the company and eventually became controller of the commodities for the business for Bausted. In one of the sections of the book by Michael Weiss, he said that Ang Siang used to hold a meeting with the Chinese traders in Bausted's office in Battery Road. And probably he was one of the first people to start the commodity trading. Ang Siang married rather late, at 28, to a lady who's 1 year older than him. This was something rather unusual for that time. He was successful, rich, and handsome. And the ladies not married at 29 would have been said to be left on the shelf. But she could have been a very rich heiress, or she could have been a very unusual woman. They seemed to have a good relationship. And he left the estate in her hands after he died in 1892. He died rather early, at 56, I think. Ang Siang had 4 sons and 4 daughters. In his time, the daughters were like commodities, married to form business alliances. His second daughter was married to the C family, the richest family at that time. And the C family was also the comprador to HSBC, so you know why he married his daughter to that family. Ang Siang had also other businesses in partnership with his first son-in-law. It was in timber and also in warehousing and commission agents. His last innovative business before he died was with the English businessman to start the Tanjung Pagar dockyards. It was innovative because when the ships come, they were able to drain the water and repair the ship. But anyway, the government acquired Tanjung Pagar dockyards, and it became Keppel Harbour. But what did Ang Siang? How did Ang Siang become rich? He invested. He may have some. His wife may have brought a lot of money with her, you know. He invested a lot in properties. He literally owned the whole of Telok Ayer Street. He had 10 houses in Telok Ayer Street, 14 houses in Amor Street, and large nutmeg plantations in Bukit Timah and in Ang Siang Hill. And with his 2 older brothers, they bought a piece of land at Toa Payoh, stretching from Lorong 6 to Bradel Road. Of course, it was acquired by the government for Toa Payoh estate. the funny thing is, according to his will, which was rather complicated, but somehow or rather, 5/6 of the wealth went to his eldest son. Only 1/6 came to my grandfather, because he was the fourth son, and he had only 2 sons. So we had to, my father and his brother had to divide the 1/6, because the will says that the money should go to the grandsons, but somehow or rather, Keng Beng, through something or other, got 5/6 of the wealth. Keng Beng, I shall read a chapter from the book titled "The Watershed of the 20th Century." When the father died, Keng Beng could not continue on with the business. He was not so smart, and neither was he internationally educated. But the end of the 18th century was marked by great political changes in China. The Middle Kingdom was riven by Boxer Rebellion, Opium War, Taiping Rebellion, Sino-Japanese War, and civil wars. The Qing dynasty, with whom the Nanyang Chinese had business dealings with, was on his way out. Keng Beng did not throw his support behind the revolutionaries. As a result, he lost most of his business contracts after the fall of Imperial China and the formation of new Chinese Republic. Keng Beng had dreams of being a big property developer. His mother was not too happy with his ambitious idea, but nevertheless, the old lady led him the initial capital.
Hold the mic closer to you.
Oh, okay. However, the redevelopment took such a long time to take off that she lost confidence, and in 1903 sued him for the return of the money. Unfortunately, she died the following year. Nonetheless, Keng Beng became the first private property developer in Singapore. At that time, at the time when he was developing the property, there was World War I, and the world was in a chaotic state. So when the property was complete, he couldn't sell the houses. So in 1919, he had no choice, but he took the choice of liquidating his father's estate, which was really, the auction took 2 days to complete. After the auction of the properties, Keng Beng had sufficient funds to maintain the lifestyle he was accustomed to. He did not engage in any kind of business, but just lived on his capital. Fortunately for him, he had funds that lasted till the end of his life. Did Keng Beng make a wise decision to liquidate the estate completely? He might have gazed into a crystal ball and spotted no signs of income or lucrative business streaming in. Did he see the coming of the Great Depression or World War II, the era in which he and his forefathers lived? The glitz and luxury of the lifestyle was gone. But fortunately, the estate of Chia Ang Siang had enough money to support 3 generations. My grandfather, who never worked, and my father, who also never worked. But poor us. We had, the Ang Siang estate paid for our education, and we had to work.
But at least they paid for your education. That's something, right? That's something. Okay. Thank you very much, Ruth. Okay. Now, Linda, how about your section? What's your section about?
Yeah, I got an axe to grind. Because she said, right, enjoy all Chia Ang Siang's money. I don't see anyone. I don't see it.
That's a button.
Okay, right. So, you see, my section is on the third son. And the third son, arguably, is one of the most, I could say, intelligent sons of Chia Ang Siang. He had his own career, he had his own job. He never had to depend on his father for a living. In fact, he was, in a way, everybody said he was disinherited, but indeed he was not. It's just that he chose his own path. he married the girl of his own choice, so he upset the whole clan, but he went ahead with doing it. He married the love of his life, so I think he did the right thing. Why not? I like men with their mind of their own. But at the same time, he also was a very generous man, and he did a lot for charity. I shall read a little passage from my book, and after that you all can find out. There's a lot of intrigue in my section, so you should go there and find out the rest. Yeah. See, in fact, I was trying to tell Mei Ling, there's a bit envious of our counterparts in Bendahari. At least they had Tok Panjang, in the itinerary. And he said, no drinks, no food. Okay, never mind. I'll say the death of Chia Keng Chiang. The many friends of Chia Keng Chiang will regret to hear of his death, which took place at his residence, number 40 An Siang Hill, this morning. He was 39 years of age. He has been an employee of Messrs. Hottenberg Brothers and Company for 11 years. The deceased was the third son of the late Mr. Chia An Siang and leaves a large family to mourn his loss. He was well known for his generosity, kind-heartedness to those in distress, and his untimely departure will be a serious loss to the Chinese generally. This short report in the Straits Times of only a few lines speaks volumes about my great-grandfather's character. He was a giving soul, generous and kind-hearted. And also to sort of summarize his contribution, I would like to compliment this passage with a pantun by the late Mr. Lim Hock Chun, courtesy of Professor Ding from academia.my. The third son's tumultuous relationship with his parents, his contributions, and the recognition from the society. Banyak duri perkara duri, mana sama duri serdang. Banyak budi perkara budi, budi yang mana di kedang orang. Yeah, so thank you. That summarizes the thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. And the third and final section is by Dan King. Can you tell us what your section is about?
Basically, about my side, civil family and some pertinent points. Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? All right. Yeah. Okay, I'll start with this. Once upon a time, nearly 150 years ago, Chia Ang Siang, landowner, merchant, and comprador, had widened his network by attending business meetings and parties. In one of these parties, he met young Si Wee Lei, another rich businessman and comprador. The meeting between both brothered business later developed into a close business relationship. And one day, during a social gathering, Ang Siang introduced his second daughter, Chia Bee Nio, to Wee Ling. Suddenly, it crossed Ang Siang's mind that Wee Ling might prove to be a good son-in-law. And one day, and later, not surprisingly, Wee Ling later married Bee Nio, sealing the bond between the two well-to-do families. Apart from being an established businessman, Wee Ling launched in 1881 the Lat Pao, the first Chinese newspaper in Singapore and Southeast Asia. He was the newspaper's owner, publisher, editor. It might seem surprising that he was a Peranakan, not a syncate from China, who started the first Chinese newspaper in Singapore. But Wee Ling was at ease in communicating in three languages, English, Chinese, and Malay. He also had some Chinese education as well. The Lat Pao newspapers lasted for 51 years, folding up in 1932. But readers can still read the Lat Pao online today, and it's provided by the NUS Chinese Library. Ang Siang was my great-great-grandfather, and Wee Ling my great-grandfather. Wee Ling came from a Hokkien Peranakan family in Melaka. Born in 1851, he left Melaka for Singapore to join the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank as a comprador. His grandfather, Si Hoot Kee from Melaka, also spent part of his life in Singapore. Hoot Kee was an early pioneer in Singapore. early part in Singapore's Hokkien community. He was a well-respected businessman, community leader, and philanthropist. He was at that time the richest Hokkien leader in the whole of Singapore. The ancestral Peranakan family of Si includes top businessmen and prominent public figures. But the most interesting is Si Wee Hock, the brother of Si Wee Lay. Wee Hock was educated in Chinese before learning English. In 1874, the Qing government sent Wee Hock to China with a few other Chinese boys to study at Boston University under the Imperial Chinese Education Scheme. Later, a couple of years ago, he was summoned by the Chinese government to serve in the Imperial Chinese Navy. But in 1884, he was killed in a battle with the French Navy in the South China Sea. So Wee Hock was not only a Peranakan hero, he was a patriot of China. I wish to close this conversation with an interesting observation of the genealogy of the Chia clan from Shitang village near Xiamen, China. The Angxiang family is part of this Chia clan. The Chia clan ancestral tree goes back as far as 600 years ago, starting with Chia Tiaosun, born in 1407 and died in 1441. Tiaosun lived during the rule of the Ming Dynasty, stretching from 1368 to 1644. He was then under the reign of Emperor Yongle, who played a leading role in the historic capital transfer of China from Nanjing to Beijing. The Great Wall was built in China more than 2,000 years ago, but it was the Ming Dynasty which rebuilt and strengthened the Great Wall, which you see today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, I have one burning question, and that is, how did you manage to come together to write this book? Could any of you just explain what came about for all of you to come together to write?
Well, actually, Hello? Hello? Actually, I am going to donate the portraits of Chia Angxiang to the museum. So the curator of the museum came to my house, and we chatted for nearly 2 hours. And he said, why don't you write your gossips into a book?
Right.
And then that's how it started.
And how did it involve Linda and
because what was so interesting is Angxiang had 4 sons, and according to his will, the wealth was only given to the grandsons, okay? Son number 1 had no children. Son number 2 had only 1 son. Son number 3 is her father, her great-grandfather, and he was disowned because he was looked upon as unfilial. He married a Eurasian girl, although he was married to a Peranakan woman. And my grandfather is the 4th son. So what happened, shall I go on? Yes. What happened was, the son number 2 is like any Asiakia. He just went wild. And he died early, but before he died, he actually willed all the shares back to his uncle, King Bing. So, this grandson was a very privileged grandson because King Bing adopted him according to the will as his son, and he got three shares. And because he was a son of the number 2 son, he got 2 shares. And my poor grandfather only had 1. I mean, for us, for his grandson. So King Bing actually got 5/6 of the shares of Angxiang huge estate. So anyway, he's not very clever. Or what I thought was, time was against him. I mean, he could have been a big property developer. But during that time, as we are facing now, it's a very turbulent time. China was in turbulence. There was World War I, and then subsequently there was this Great Depression, and then Second World War. And the 20th century, things were changing. We were going from old economy to new economy.
So this happens every 100 years, so it's not strange.
It's not strange, absolutely. Linda, anything to add?
I connected with Ruth because when I was young, I only know my grand-uncles, who were the sons of Chia, the third son of Chia Queenie Chang. Other than that, I don't know anyone else. You know, where are they? Are they still alive? Are there people out there? Yeah.
Exactly. Hence my curiosity.
Yes.
You know?
So then I think there was this show on Channel News Asia where my grandfather's road, isn't it? And I think Ruth, this thing. So I went to speak to the producer and say, I want to speak to this Ruth Chia, you know. So that's how we connected. And after that, she connected me with quite a lot, in fact, almost the entire clan, you know. Yeah. Because one night there were about almost 50 people who were invited to my house. We were all meeting, you know, and suddenly I'm related to 40 over people. I've got 40 over new relatives, you know. Yeah, so it grew and grew. And then later on when she was invited to write something about Chia An Siang, she said, I think you're the best person for the third son.
Yes.
So, okay. So that's how I started this thing. But it was very challenging because there was little to work on because he died 40 years before I was born. But of course, I'm fortunate because I've got a lot of sources, some from my grandmother, my late father. So, you know, I was able to gather this together. Yeah, and came up with this. Yep.
Thank you, Linda. How about you, Tianyi? Were you part of the invite to the clan gathering?
Yeah, no,
did you know Ruth and Linda before that?
Ruth is my first cousin.
Right.
Okay, it all started one day, more than 3 years ago. Ruth suddenly gave me a phone call. She was writing a book, Ang Siang. So he asked me whether I can help in sort of editing her manuscript. I said yes. So also I'm related to Ruth because my great grandfather, Si Wee Lei, married Ang Siang's second daughter. So actually I was the last to join the party, latecomer. Okay, so that how it started. Then suddenly Ruth said, hey, why don't you write a separate article on Si Wee Lei? I feel I'm very reluctant. I'm a journalist, but lazy. So I thought maybe I write only 5 pages. In the end, turned out to be about 4,000. But you know, being a journalist,
like a journalist,
I like to keep. I don't want to be sort of keep it short and sweet. So I don't want to write more than 4,000. Enough is enough. A journalist was still being lazy. And Colin, Linda, we used to work in the same office. We're all journalists. And both the romances started at the newsroom.
Okay, so now we are going to have different questions now, huh? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's get some questions from the audience, and we'll have to wrap it up soon. Okay, the first one. A perception of Peranakans is they belong to high society elites, most holding high positions, wealthy, active, and influential figures in education, business, health, politics, the arts. Comment, please.
Well, they were the first few. The Peranakans belonged to. They were the first few immigrants that came from China.
Close.
They were the first. They were the Peranakans belonged to the first few immigrants that came from China and stayed. You know, previously to that, the Chinese traders just came, trade, and then went off. You know, but they stayed, and they actually customized themselves to the local customs, and when the Malaysia and Singapore were British colonies, they saw that English was very important. So they sent their children to English schools. So they made their wealth that way. Of course, you know, when you're the first to come to any country, you always life is easier, yes. You know. So.
Thank you. Okay, let's grab maybe 2 more questions. Did you grow up like or did you grow up with a mache, like most wealthy Peranakan families? If you did, what was it like?
I was a very naughty girl. I used to love climbing trees, and the mache would come with a stick, with a cane to tell me to come down, because if I had fall down and broken my leg, she would be blamed. So she was always there. So she's actually, in those days, we treated maids and our house employees as equal. I used to remember that my brother and I used to run down to the driver's outhouse, and we used to sit down and eat with our hands with them. And the Malay driver was actually very fond of my brother. He used to teach him driving, and we went fishing with my father and all that. So that was our life. That's why my father never worked.
Thank you very much. Any question from the audience? If not, I'll take the last one from the screen. Okay. Let's see. Shall we read the one from Ronnie? That's very interesting. While Chia An Siang left so much money to at least 2 generations, was there enough good genes to stand the descendants in good stead?
Well, I'm not bad, right? we all had to study, we all had to work, and we all became professionals. Unfortunately, we had to work, that's it.
I dare say it actually worked out better, wouldn't you say? Right? Aye.
Well, at least we were not sold as commodities to form business alliances.
I can speak for the third son, because most of his descendants, we didn't really, if you read the book, right, the will, there was a bit of a difference in the will. Chia An Siang actually, in his will, he actually left 1/6 of his fortune, which is to all of them, and you could enjoy your life with just 1/6 of it for a few generations. But when Chia An Siang passed on, there was nothing given to the family of the third son. So, but we were all very fortunate because we emulated him. We emulated him because, he went out on his own, had a job, and did what he wanted and make a success of himself. And that's how we follow that doctrine.
Absolutely. And now you're all 3 authors of a wonderful book. Thank you very much. Okay. With that, I think we thank all the panelists here. And strangely, I have to introduce myself and my own book because there are no moderators for myself for some strange reason. So I'm
Okay, apa khabar semua? Lu orang boleh cakap baba tak? Tak boleh lah, tengok semua tipu ni. Sikit. Okay. I'm here to introduce my book, which was actually published a few years ago. It's called Cerita Cerita Baba, right? Limited print, hardback. Please go and buy. Not much left. I lie. Plenty left. Please go and buy. Yes. The reason why I wrote this book is because I'm actually involved in trying to revitalize the Baba Malay language. It is highly endangered right now. As of today, the last count was we have less than 2,000 speakers left in I think, Singapore. Okay, we don't know how many speakers there are in Melaka. Okay, that was back in the 90s. So you can imagine, and it's about 30 years later, how many speakers do we have left? Okay, self-identified speakers. So some speakers are better than others, right? And because of that, we've been trying to revitalize the language the best we can, and we've been conducting Baba Malay classes, writing textbooks, and blah, 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 blah. But the main problem exists, and the main problem is there is no use for the language. There's no way to practice the language, nothing to read, nothing to see. I mean, yes, we have the occasional wayang Peranakan, and if you are fortunate enough to have family to talk with, then
good for you. But the rest of the learners, they are all suffering from a lack of resources. So therefore, I wrote this book in hopes of helping them. This book is written in Baba Malay. It is not classical Baba Malay, as I keep pointing out to people, because I don't think any person in our generation can actually understand very classical Baba Malay, as in presented in Pilot Oon mentioned Samkok before, cerita Dulu Kala, right? It's very difficult to understand because it was not uniform. The Baba Malay was not very uniform back there. So this book is written in Baba Malay and simultaneously translated into English at the same time on the opposing page. And therefore, it is a very useful tool, if you would, to help learners understand the language. I also draw from a lot of inspiration from old writers like Chan Kim Boon, cerita Dahulu Kala, and so forth. Okay, I bore you, everyone's tired, half of you are gone or asleep. So let me just give you an example of what's inside here, okay? I read from page 82, and I'll read the Baba. If you have the book with you, you can turn to page 83 and read the English translation, because I won't translate. Okay. Ada satu hari, si Baci ada kat kedai kopi sama-sama dia punya 3 kawan rapat. Si Putih, si Botak sama si Tikus. Dia ceritakan sama dia punya kawan rapat pasal dia punya hal. Gua ada sikit susah ni jam, si Baci kata. Apa susah, si Botak tanya. Gua barangkali tak cukup makan lagi kat rumah, si Baci jawab. Kena cari kerja lah, si Tikus kata. Kerja? Ai, gua punya orang mana boleh kerja. Kalau gua mulai cari kerja, lu orang mana ada kawan lagi. Jorang pun gelak ketawa sama-sama. Si Baci bacakan satu pantun kasih dia punya kawan-kawan. Burung terbang tinggi-tinggi, betul bebas, betul bergengsi. Senangkan badan, senangkan diri. Itulah gua punya janji. Si Baci punya kawan-kawan pun semua tepuk tangan. A1 top side punya pantun. Si Tikus pujikan dia. Karangkan satu buku pantun, jual lah, si Putih cakap main-main. Tapi bukan cakap main-main. Kalau gua tak dapat cari duit, amcam bikin, si Baci. Suasana dia nanti tak boleh hari-hari tak kerja lagi. Gua cakap sama lu, kena cari kerja lah. Lu sudah lama tak tolong lu punya rumah tangga, amcam lagi. Ni jam lu punya mak ni macam, kena cari kerja lah, si Tikus kata lagi. Alamak, gua tak boleh kerja lah. Ni bukan gua punya janji, si Baci memek. Apa lagi? Cari bomo lah, si Putih jawab macam main-main. Bomo? Si Baci pun fikir. Oh dear, I see blank faces all along. But you know what? The translations are in the book. So do support struggling Baba Malay writers and buy me a book. Kamsia semua.
The second day of the festival has come to an end, and I wish to thank you for the pleasure of your company. I hope that you're now inspired to read, to write, to imagine, to express yourselves, to be interested in others, to delve into the mind, the heart and soul of human beings everywhere. Take care and God bless.